owner of the US Mega Farmest video is Puremont para Intratnamiento Wino Infringe de Recos de Originales. Los Direcos de la Novela y la Imagen son del otro original, no reclamamos propiedad. No te gusta esperar y quieres escuchar este fanfic completo ahora? Suscríbete a nuestro Patreon, donde encontrarás los mejores fanfics. Chapter 476 The Big Pot Era. Qinzhou shook hands with him gently, and without bothering to be polite, he directly ordered, Chef Wang, right. Please have someone clean up a place first. The wild boar has been washed and will be moved over. Wang Yungan heard this and did not dare to neglect it. He said hello and turned back to work. The master called 2 people and moved a few tables together to put the wild boar. Then he prepared other things so that it would be convenient to clean up later. As soon as the side was ready, Will and Simon came over, each carrying half of the wild boar meat that had been cleaned. Wang Yungan looked at the 2 people carrying the pork and couldn't help smacking his lips. This fan must be about 200 or 300 pounds, right? Just carried it over so easily. However, now was not the time for him to sigh, so he hurried over and said, Come on, 2 big brothers, put it here first. Will and the other 2 did not do it immediately, but turned to look at Qinzhou. Until seeing Qinzhou nod slightly, they exerted force this time and threw the pork on the table. A loud bang scared the boys around, and they quickly retracted their reluctant gazes and focused on the pork on the table. Even Wang Yungan, who was standing by, grimaced. Fortunately, my table was not made of plastic, otherwise it would be ruined. After Will and Simon put down the wild boar meat, they clapped their hands casually and walked over with a smile. Boss, it's okay, so we'll go back first. Well? How about having lunch here? Qinzhou politely tried to keep him. After all, it was obvious that the banquet was about to start, so it would be unreasonable not to keep him. Will waved his hands repeatedly, and even Simon shook his head. When Simon was about to say something, Will glared at him, and Simon immediately wilted. Well, boss, Sooty has already prepared lunch, and she's not bad, so we won't bother you. Qinzhou smiled, and didn't say anything else, but waved his hand casually. Okay, I know you don't like eating wild boars, go ahead. Will laughed dryly. What's so delicious about this kind of thing that can be seen everywhere? And the meat is so tough. He shook his head and sighed in his heart. He really couldn't understand why their boss, such a rich man, would like to eat this. But what he didn't know was that in China, only the rich can eat this kind of animal. As for ordinary people, it's okay for those near the mountains. If you are lucky, you can still see it. As for those people in the plains, it is estimated that they have never really seen a wild boar in their lives. For example, now, including Wang Yungan, several people looked at the big wild boar in a daze. He couldn't remember how long it had been since he had seen such a big wild boar. After Will and the other 2 left together, Wang Yungan came up and hesitated for a moment before asking, Mr. Clean, how are we going to cook today? We came in a hurry and didn't prepare any vegetables. We have to go buy vegetables now. Qinzhou smiled and pointed to a place not far away and said, See, there is a vegetable field over there. Basically, there are common vegetables. You can just go there to pick whatever you need. Chef Wang was stunned. Then he remembered that this was a farm, so how could there be a lack of these things? I say, Qinzhou, you have nothing to do so early in the morning. You even went into the mountains to kill a wild boar and brought it back. Is it just for them to have a snack? Lin Yu walked over with his hands folded, looking curious. Qinzhou did not hide anything. He pointed to the woods over there and said with a smile, I didn't want to, but this guy ran into the woods, so I had to kill him and make him delicious. Lin Yu's face changed slightly and exclaimed, In the woods? How could there be a wild boar? Qinzhou shrugged. I don't know either. I've asked someone to check. Here they come. Before he finished speaking, Old John rode his horse and trotted over. Boss, we found it. It's over there in the woods. The fence has been destroyed. Old John's tone was full of embarrassment. He really didn't expect that these guys would break through the fence and get in. Oh? A lot. Qinzhou touched his chin. Sure enough, it was true. John nodded, there are several damages. It shouldn't be done by a group of guys. Looking at the people who were busy dealing with the wild boar over there, Old John said with some concern. Although the wild boar was shot, there are probably other animals inside. You can tell from the damage to the fence that at least several groups of big guys have come in. Qinzhou also nodded slightly in agreement. He knew there must be others, but the woods were too big and he couldn't find them all by himself. What should we do? Should we clear the woods? It's a bit dangerous to let these guys in there. Old John lit up a cigarette, took a deep puff, and nodded in agreement. I thought so too. It's not safe to let these guys stay in the ranch. We can't carry their weapons everywhere. That's it, let's find a time, call everyone, and let's clear the woods. Kinzu finally made the decision. After the few people made the decision, Old John didn't say anything else, but asked, "Boss, how about this side? How should we repair the fence? Should we continue to use this kind of wood, or change to something else? What kind of fence are we using now?" Kinzu looked at him curiously, wanting to know what kind of fence could be easily destroyed by those guys. Old John smiled awkwardly, took a deep puff of his cigarette, and then said, "It's the old-fashioned wooden fence. It may have been a long time, so it fell down after being hit by these guys. In fact, Old John is also very depressed now. He can't understand why these guys are crazy. They don't want to stay in the mountains, but have to break into the ranch and stay in the woods. In fact, the fence of the ranch only serves as a warning and indicates the boundary of the ranch. In fact, the ranch does not really prohibit animals from breaking in. It's just that the problem is a bit serious this time. These guys actually broke into the vicinity of the residential area. If they suddenly go crazy one day, it will be a big problem. Old John, what do you think? Which kind of fence should we use?" Kinzu thought for a long time and threw the question to John. He is not an old cowboy, so how can he know what kind of fence is good? Old John might have known this for a long time, so he was not surprised. After pondering for a moment, he said, "Boss, I think we should change to the barbed wire. Although it costs a lot, the protective effect of this kind of fence is better." Seeing that Kinzu was a little puzzled, Old John explained with a smile, "Boss, this kind of barbed wire fence is fixed with wooden stakes and then wrapped several times. The key is that there are caltrops on the iron wire, and the wild beasts dare not force their way in. Thanks to WellFKW for the reward of 1,000 starting coins, and thanks to Bookfriend 20170222149073226 for the reward of 500 starting coins. Chapter 477. Hello, I'm the most beautiful Shirley. Seeing the satisfied smile on Kinzu's face, Old John added, "Boss, if it's on the grass, we can drive wooden stakes or directly use iron stakes to fix it. And if we get to the woods, we can also directly wrap the wire around the trees. In this way, they can't break through even if they want to." Now, Kinzu was completely relieved. He smiled and patted Old John's broad shoulders, and said with satisfaction, "Old John, this matter is left to you. As for the money, you can go directly to Eva to get it. Don't be afraid of spending money. You must get this done for me as soon as possible." John nodded to show that he understood. "Boss, don't worry, I will definitely handle it as soon as possible." After he left, Lin Yu looked at the small woods next to them with some concern. "Clean, are there really wild animals there? Will they run out?" Kinzu knew what he was worried about, smiled and patted her soft shoulders, and comforted her. "Don't worry, it's okay, we will sweep it in a few days. Besides, I'm still here, right?" Lin Yu blushed slightly. After breaking free from Kinzu's dirty hands, he felt relieved. He didn't continue the topic, but pointed to the other side and said with a smile, "Why, you don't want to have lunch with them?" Kinzu looked back and saw that the workers had finished their work and came to the door of the villa. At this moment, they were sitting at the table in twos and threes, staring at the simple kitchen with expectation. They had heard that they didn't have to eat boxed lunch today, and the employer would treat them to wild boar meat. "Wild boar meat, I ate it once when I was a child," said a middle-aged man with wrinkles on his face at the simple table, smoking a cigarette, and said to the young man sitting next to him with emotion, "Do you remember your Uncle Dashan? I remember that wild boar was hunted by him from the mountain, weighing 500 or 600 kilograms. Every family in our village got a lot of it. The taste was so delicious." As he said that, the middle-aged man wiped the corner of his mouth, looking like he was savoring it. The young man couldn't help swallowing his saliva after hearing this, and said with some regret, "What a pity, I was still young at the time, and I don't remember what it tasted like." Kinzu didn't know what the conversation was about, but looking at the expectant eyes of the crowd, he shook his head helplessly. "Forget it, I won't get involved. They can still eat well without me. If I go, they will become restrained." Lin Yu smiled and nodded. She also knew this truth, but after all, the food was from Kinzu, and she wanted these guys to accept this favor. Since Kinzu was not willing to go now, Lin Yu didn't force it, but followed Kinzu back to the villa. The workers' lunch was settled, but she hadn't yet. Just like Kinzu said, she was not willing to eat with the workers and act pressure to them. As Kinzu expected, without the boss present, the atmosphere of these workers at noon was particularly good. Especially the wild boar meat cooked by Chef Wang, plus various fresh vegetables produced in the vegetable field. Each table was full. Steamed, stewed, fried, stir-fried, all kinds of side dishes made up a good whole pig feast. Although no one drank alcohol because they had to work in the afternoon, everyone ate with their mouths full of oil. "How is it, uncle? I didn't lie to you, it tastes good." It was the same middle-aged man just now. At this moment, he was covering his stomach with his hands, looking at the young man next to him with a satisfied expression. The young man nodded in agreement and picked up the last piece of wild boar meat stir-fried with chili with chopsticks and put it in his mouth. While chewing, he sighed in dissatisfaction. "It's really delicious. I heard that foreigners don't like to eat these things. What a waste." The middle-aged man nodded in agreement, looked at another group of foreigners eating hamburgers, and said, "I don't know what they think. Such delicious food, they don't eat it." While the workers were eating enthusiastically here, Kinzu in the villa was also in a good mood. There were beauties all over the table. He had never dared to think about this kind of life before. After lunch, Kinzu prepared some food for Daha and Xiaohe, and threw some fish food into the bathtub of the hawksbill turtle. He left the three beauties behind to clean up the battlefield. He took a pot of comfy tea that Eva had just brewed, took Shirley by the hand, and walked to their second floor. Just as he was enjoying the tea and chatting with Shirley, something happened that made him feel even happier. Master, Heidi is back." The little parrot flapped its wings, landed on Kinzu's shoulder excitedly, and looked at him expectantly. "Ha ha, little guy, you still know how to come back. Here, this is a reward for you." Kinzu laughed, touched the little parrot's head, and handed over another spiritual liquid with a look of satisfaction. The little parrot was not polite, and stretched its head to take it into its mouth. "After working so hard for so long, and tossing for so long, isn't it just for this thing? It is said that the fittest survive." The little parrot also knew that what Kinzu had in his hand was a good thing that could make it stronger. So from the beginning, Haley lost. It's not that Heidi has no feelings for her. The most important thing is that animals have an instinctive reaction to things that can make them stronger. Sure enough, the little parrot that ate the spiritual liquid began to get hot all over, and then a feeling of comfort spread throughout the body. Looking down, Heidi was surprised to find that she had grown taller and taller. Just as Heidi was happily acting coquettishly around Kinzu, Shirley next to her blinked her big eyes. "Uncle, is this the parrot that Aunt Eva said? It's so beautiful." I don't know why, Shirley is getting more and more sleepy now. When Kinzu entered the wood in the morning, she went back to her room to sleep, so she didn't know what happened outside. Kinzu rubbed the little girl's head and introduced her. "Shirley, this is Heidi, our new friend." Shirley stretched out her hand obediently. "Heidi, hello, nice to meet you." Heidi was a little confused. She looked at the white and tender little hand, then looked down at her own paws. She tentatively raised one and wanted to shake hands with Shirley, but the other one couldn't keep balance and fell off Kinzu. Shirley was amused by Heidi's actions and laughed. She quickly stretched out her little hand and helped the little girl up again. Kinzu was scratching his head. This idiot, could he be overpampered? He looked quite smart at first. When Heidi climbed up, it seemed as if she had come to her senses and stretched out a wing. "Hello Shirley, I'm Heidi, the most beautiful Heidi." Shirley giggled and stretched out her hand. "Hello Heidi, I'm Shirley, the most beautiful Shirley." Please vote for the new week. Chapter 478 Little Jerry's Grievance. The little parrot blinked its eyes, looked at Shirley in confusion, then tilted its head and said with a hint of grievance, "Shirley is not as pretty as Heidi. Heidi is the prettiest." Kinzu was stunned. What the hell was this? Shirley was also stunned. She blinked her big eyes and muttered, "No, Shirley is the prettiest." Then, Shirley turned her head to look at Kinzu and pouted her little mouth and said, "Uncle, don't you think so?" What else could Kinzu say? He could only nod and say, "Yes, Shirley is the prettiest." Now, Heidi, who was already aggrieved, turned her head and ignored you. Kinzu looked at it with a bit of laughter and tears. What was going on? There was no way. They were all little ancestors. He had to start coaxing this little thing again. Just when Kinzu was busy dealing with the two little ancestors, a dull roar suddenly sounded in the ranch. The workers who had just finished their meal were resting in groups of 3 or 2. Suddenly, they saw a fiery red sports car driving over like lightning. Before everyone could react, the fiery red sports car drifted in front of the door and then stopped steadily. Bang! The car door opened and was slammed shut again. A blonde man in a fiery red outfit got out of the car and walked into the villa. TSK, uncle, look at that girl, her butt is really big, you'll definitely have a son if you marry her. It was the same young man from the morning. At this moment, he was squatting on the ground on the side, smoking with the middle-aged man, looking nothing like a child. You don't dream, work hard, and when you make money in the future, I will help you buy a house in your hometown, and then let your aunt introduce you to a partner at home, so that you can get married and have children as soon as possible. The middle-aged man who was called uncle by the young man had all the wrinkles on his face scattered at this time, and his face was full of longing. Although the young man disagreed with his uncle's opinion, thinking about his own situation, he sighed deeply and got up to work. The situation in the villa was also a bit strange. Eva and Dale looked at the women in front of them, and their expressions became colorful. There was a hint of surprise and a hint of disbelief. Haley's face opposite was also not very good, with a hint of anger and helplessness. She didn't expect that she had just brought Heidi home, and not long after, she found that Heidi was gone again. After she searched inside and outside the house, she almost despaired. At this time, she suddenly remembered the evil smile on Kinzu's mouth in the morning. When she went back to find the locator, she turned it on and sat down on the sofa. Sure enough, Heidi's position still appeared in that place. Lin Yu, who was next to her, looked at the expressions of the three women and was a little confused. She was not at the scene in the morning, but she didn't know what happened. So she was a little confused about the current situation. Why did these women look so strange? Ahem, Eva coughed twice, broke the silence first, and pointed upstairs. Miss Haley, go up, the boss is upstairs. Haley nodded, looked at Eva gratefully, and turned to go upstairs. When Haley's figure disappeared from sight, Dale swallowed her saliva and couldn't help but said, Eva, that little parrot, won't it really fly back? Eva looked upstairs, her hands kept moving, and said, look at her, it should be. But how is this possible? So far away. Dale couldn't accept it. Is this a messenger pigeon? Eva shrugged, what else is impossible about this boss? Dale was silent, stopped talking, and started to get busy. From beginning to end, the two did not explain to Lin Yu next to them, which made her confused and even more curious about Kinzu. Not to mention their conversation downstairs, the situation upstairs was also a bit weird. Haley looked depressed and powerless, sitting on the bench, with mixed feelings in her heart. Kinzu was lying leisurely on the recline. The little parrot, who was subdued by his sugar-coated bullets, was jumping on his shoulders and stretching out its wings to scratch his hair from time to time. As for Shirley, she was sent downstairs to play with Eva. It would be inconvenient for her to negotiate later. Little Jerry was pulled by Kinzu to be a coolie. He took blueberries and handed them to the little parrot one by one. Don't mention the depression in his heart. These are all its food rations, all of which were exploited by Kinzu. The landlord's family doesn't have any left. The owner is seriously exploiting the working people. I'm going to sue him. I must go. But where should I sue? Little Jerry's dark eyes kept rolling and rolling, and he was calculating in his heart. Once a person is distracted, it is easy to make mistakes, not to mention little Jerry, who was a jack of all trades. When it was thinking about it, it accidentally sent a blueberry to Kinzu's face. Parkai the blueberries broke, and the juice slowly flowed on Kinzu's face. The white casual t-shirt on his body was instantly covered with a few cute blue flowers. After coming back to his senses, little Jerry was stunned, looking at Kinzu with a silly face, not knowing what to do. Kinzu looked at this idiot with a dark face. The good atmosphere was ruined by this guy. Stupid, it's dirty. The little parrot Heidi was gloating and jumping around. Even Haley, who was a little depressed, couldn't help but laugh out loud. Squeak, little Jerry reacted and quickly reached out to help Kinzu wipe the blueberry juice off his body. But its little paws were not clean to begin with, and now it's bad. Originally, there were a few small flowers, but now it has turned into a blue sky, with patches of blue, which looks particularly eye-catching. Kinzu couldn't help but picked up the little guy, pointed at his little head with his finger, and scolded. Look at what you have done, what are you thinking about? Little Jerry hung his head, not daring to say a word, and could only look at the little parrot Heidi for help. After all, brother has been feeding you for a long time, you can't just watch you die. Heidi was a little scared by little Jerry's look, and couldn't help but flap her wings twice, flew to little Jerry's head, and looked at Kinzu pitifully. Kinzu wanted to continue to teach little Jerry a few more words, but when he saw Heidi, he remembered that Haley was still around. Embarrassed, he turned around and smiled at Haley, and Kinzu said, "I'm sorry, Miss Haley, I'm going to change my clothes first, and then talk later." Haley nodded gently. "Mr. Clean, go quickly, I'm fine." Kinzu didn't say anything else, but turned back and glared at little Jerry fiercely, got up and walked towards the bathroom. As a result, before he had taken 2 steps, he heard the shrill scream of Heidi, the little parrot, from behind. Chapter 479 Shirley's abnormal behavior. "Don't touch me, it's dirty, bastard, let go." Kinzu was stunned, looked back, and almost laughed to death. In order to thank Heidi for saving his life, little Jerry stretched out his 2 little black hands and printed them on Heidi's beautiful feathers. Now the 2 little guys were all sticky and looked very embarrassed. After hesitating for a while, Kinzu stepped forward and smiled apologetically at Haley. "I'll take the 2 little guys to take a bath first, and I'll be back soon." Although Haley was a little disappointed that she couldn't be alone with Heidi for a while, she also knew that now was not the time to entangle this. She nodded and agreed. When Kinzu helped the 2 little guys take a bath and changed his clothes and came up, half an hour had passed. At this moment on the 2nd floor, Haley was not the only one watching. Eva and Linyu were upstairs, talking to Haley. I think Eva felt that it was not appropriate to leave Haley alone upstairs, so she came up to accompany her. Seeing Kinzu coming over, Eva smiled and said, "Boss, has the troublemaker finished washing?" Kinzu nodded, put Heidi in his hand on the stand, let it stand on its own, and said with a smile, "It disappeared after washing. I guess it went to its wife to cry." Eva laughed, and Linyu couldn't help laughing. She also knew that Jerry's wife had taken advantage of Jerry. Haley couldn't help herself at the side. "You know, she is also a woman who makes hundreds of thousands of dollars a minute. It's hard to have a vacation now, but this happened again. It would be strange if she felt good." "Mr. Clean, look, Heidi," Haley couldn't say anything more. Last time, she didn't stop her and let her take Heidi back. But what's the truth? What's the use of taking her back? Didn't she run back happily? Can he return Heidi to her this time? Haley was unsure. Reality is often so unexpected. Just when she was hesitating, the man opposite smiled softly and said something that she could hardly believe. "No problem, Miss Haley, I've said it before, Heidi is free, she can go wherever she wants." Until she got into her sports car with Heidi in her arms, Haley still felt a little dizzy. Did she really give it back to her? At this moment upstairs, Eva also asked Kinzu the same question. "Clean, you just gave the parrot back to her?" Looking at Eva's strange eyes, Kinzu reached out his hand and slapped her hips hard. "What are you thinking? Am I the kind of person?" Eva moaned and softened in Kinzu's arms. Although she didn't say anything, her eyes clearly conveyed a message. "You are." Rolling his eyes, Kinzu stopped dwelling on this question. Looking at Linyu, who was blushing beside him, he smiled at her kindly. The girl with glasses, who was a little shy to begin with, was startled by Kinzu's sudden smile. She stood up nervously and said awkwardly, "You guys continue, I'll go down first." Then, she ran down without looking back. Kinzu was so upset. "Am I that scary?" Eva was in Kinzu's arms, laughing so hard that she fell backwards. Kinzu was furious. Without saying anything, he hugged Eva's body, found the right position and pressed against her as she laughed. After a long time, Kinzu let go of the breathless Eva and looked at her with a sly smile. "Are you still laughing?" Eva gave him a charming look. Just as she was about to say something, she saw Kinzu lower his head again, and suddenly she could only make a mm sound. Only when Eva surrendered completely did Kinzu let her go contentedly. "Clean, can you tell me about your swimsuit now?" Eva lay in Kinzu's arms, staring at his increasingly angular face, feeling confused. Kinzu did not notice Eva's change of mood, hugged her soft body, and began to tell her the story of hugely armed 7 captures of Mangado in the Romance of the Three Kingdoms. After listening to Kinzu's story, Eva came back to her senses and looked at him with an ambiguous expression. "You want to conquer that woman like this? This is a good idea." Kinzu rolled his eyes helplessly, and could not help but slap the plump breasts again, causing Eva to twist her body unwillingly. "I did that for the little guy. I trained it so obediently. If she takes it away again, I will be in trouble." Eva snorted, and said nothing more, but arched into Kinzu's arms. By the way, where's Shirley? At this time, Kinzu remembered that he seemed to have not seen this girl for a while. Eva laughed foolishly for a few times, and under Kinzu's surprised gaze, she said softly, "I asked Dale to take her out to play." The clouds cleared and the rain stopped. Kinzu was refreshed and walked out of the bedroom with Eva in his arms. Coming to the living room, Shirley was teasing Daha boredly, while she held her head far away and bullied Dudu in the corner. Jerry hadn't come back yet. I don't know if he was beaten by Tom or he was afraid to come back and beat him himself. Seeing Kinzu coming down, Shirley jumped into his arms. After Kinzu held her and sat down on the sofa, Shirley asked in confusion, "Uncle, where is Heidi? Why can't I see her?" "Heidi?" Kinzu touched his nose awkwardly. "Why, do you miss her? Wasn't she still sulking in the afternoon?" Shirley snorted, "Shirley is the prettiest." After saying that, she turned her head and said with a smile, "But I won't argue with her. As long as Uncle knows that I am the prettiest, that's enough." Kinzu was speechless. What happened to Shirley? She became so cheerful. Thinking of this, Kinzu asked tentatively, "Shirley, do you miss Aunt Christine?" Shirley was stunned when she heard this, and then she was silent for a moment and nodded. "Uncle, I miss Aunt Christine. Can we call her?" Kinzu was even more surprised when he heard this. Is this still the autistic Shirley? What happened today? However, now is not the time to worry about this. Looking at the little girl's expectant eyes, Kinzu picked up his phone and called Christine. Chapter 480. Contact with the country. Christine, who had just returned home, received a call from Kinzu while removing her makeup. Looking at the strange yet familiar number on the phone, Christine's heart could not help but ripple. Without stopping, Christine casually opened the phone. "Hi, Clean, what's the matter?" Kinzu glanced at Shirley, who was a little nervous in his arms, and chuckled. "Christine, I'm fine, but Shirley wants to talk to you about something." "Shirley?" Christine's hands froze, she put down the wet wipes, and picked up the phone. "Are you serious? Shirley will look for me?" Kinzu didn't say anything, put the phone to Shirley's ear, and smiled and said, "Girl, your mother's phone number." Shirley looked up at Kinzu, understood what he meant, and called out obediently, "Mom." In an instant, tears welled up in Christine's eyes. How long has it been? She herself couldn't remember how long it had been. Facing a silent Shirley every day, who could imagine how much pressure she was under? Suppressing her surging emotions, Christine said with a choked voice, "My dear daughter, Mom is here." Kinzu smiled gently, pointed to the kitchen at Shirley, and then stood up and left the sofa. He left this quiet little world to the mother and daughter who were not biological but better than biological. Coming to the kitchen, looking at Dale who was making trouble, Kinzu gently waved his hand and motioned her to come over. When Dale came out wiping her hands, Kinzu asked, "Dale, where did you take Shirley today? Why did her mood change so much?" "Her." Dale blinked in confusion and said blankly, "We didn't go anywhere. We just walked around the pier and blew the sea breeze." "Her." Now it was Kinzu's turn to be confused. It was a normal trip. How could there be such a big change? He shook his head and forgot it. If he couldn't figure it out, he wouldn't think about it. It was probably because she ate too many dishes containing spiritual energy, so it was fine naturally. Well, that's it. Kinzu felt that his guess must be correct, so he discovered a worry and began to care about today's dinner. What made him curious was that Eva looked like she was preparing Chinese food. When did this girl learn to cook Chinese food? Unfortunately, Kinzu, who wanted to visit, was driven out by the two women, saying that he wanted to see their cooking skills today. Helplessly, Kinzu had to turn back to the living room. Looking at Shirley, who was in high spirits and talking on the phone with Christine, Kinzu shook his head and had to go to the multi-purpose hall next door, leaving the living room to the little girl. Da Hectors and Xiao Hectors followed him happily. Seeing little Jerry being scolded today, these brothers were so happy. Go, don't join in the fun. There's nothing to eat for you." As soon as Kinzu saw the faces of the two guys, he knew that the two idiots must be hungry again, and waved his hand, as if to drive them back like flies. Kinzu was relieved when the two troublemakers left in a wrong manner. He came to the big fish tank and looked at the hawksbill turtle get in it, a little dazed. Will this guy die? Looking at the hawksbill turtle lying motionless on the bottom of the sea, Kinzu's head was a little big. This guy can't die. He picked up the fish food and sprinkled some down, and the hawksbill turtle's head moved slightly. Kinzu's mood had just returned to normal, and he saw that the hawksbill turtle was not moving again. Because this guy, after eating the fish food in his mouth, he didn't even look at the fish food spilled next to him. Kinzu was a little anxious. Damn, are you still throwing a tantrum? If you don't eat, won't you starve to death sooner or later? Picking up the phone and checking the internet, Kinzu finally understood that although the hawksbill turtle is an omnivore, it mainly eats meat. Oh my god, no wonder it's not interested in feeding fish food to this guy. But after knowing this, Kinzu was even more confused. He compared the small body of this guy with his hand. Well, it's so small, where can I find small fish and shrimp to feed it? Kinzu had no choice but to go to the cold storage and take out a herring that he had caught last time and frozen but not processed. He found a knife and cut it into small pieces on the fish tank. Sure enough, stimulated by the fishy smell, the hawksbill turtle became energetic, scratched its limbs a few times, and began to chase the fish meat floating in the water. But before a while, Kinzu was dumbfounded. Right. You won't eat it if it sinks to the bottom of the water? Kinzu was so angry. This guy is too hypocritical. Whether he wants to eat it or not, I don't want to feed it. He cut the whole fish with a few knives, washed his hands, and went back to the bedroom to pick up his laptop to surf the internet. After logging onto Penguin and casually checking the news, I was alerted by the constant stream of messages. I was pulled into a group. While bragging and chatting with friends in the group, Kinzu was also chatting with a few women in small windows. Zumengyo, Suruli, Yangye, and even Linyu were playing Penguin. Kinzu was so depressed. Why did you play Penguin when you're just playing Twitter? Just when he was feeling depressed, Zumengyo sent him a row of kitchen knives and bombs. Kinzu's heart trembled, and he replied with a guilty conscience. Honey, what's wrong? What's the matter with the child? Zumengyo replied very quickly, and still followed with a few kitchen knives. Kinzu was stunned, and before he could react, he casually replied, what child? Zumengyo sat in her office, pouting her lips, looking at the photo of the delicate little girl in her lover's space, and said angrily, you're just pretending. Tell me, whose child is that in your space? It can't be yours, right? Kinzu was embarrassed. It turned out that she was talking about Shirley. He sent a sweaty expression, do you think I can have a child this big? Zumengyo bit her lower lip, snorted coldly, and sent a bombshell, who knows? Of course she knew it wasn't Kinzu's. After all, judging from the age of the little girl, Kinzu was probably still in college at the time. But it couldn't be Kinzu's either. The little girl was so beautiful, who knew which vixen her mother was? No, he couldn't stay in China anymore. It seemed that he had to find an opportunity to go abroad. Kinzu rolled his eyes. This girl seemed to be jealous. Too lazy to type, Kinzu directly played a video. When he saw Zumengyo's resentful look with her lower lip wagging, Kinzu suddenly felt his heart tingling. What's wrong, little girl, are you jealous? Kinzu chuckled. Humph. Zumengyo didn't say anything, and rolled her eyes at Kinzu charmingly. Chapter 481. Stir-fried kidney. Kinzu chuckled twice, and under Zumengyo's murderous gaze, he restrained his smile and told Shirley's story. Of course, proper beautification is still necessary, such as returning to China with them, which Kinzu said was an accidental encounter in China. Another example is the ambiguous relationship with Christine. After Kinzu explained that she was a lesbian, Zumengyo completely believed that he was pure. As a woman, she is easily sentimental. After listening to Kinzu's story, Zumengyo's face was crying like a little cat, sobbing and saying, Kinzu, Shirley is so pitiful, you must take good care of her. Kinzu was a little embarrassed. Although he was a little moved at the beginning, he didn't do this. After saying a few words, Kinzu had to hang up that video because Zumengyo had to go to work and she had to touch up her makeup first. As soon as the video was hung up, the door was pushed open and Shirley walked in holding Kinzu's big mobile phone. Uncle, Mom wants to talk to you. Kinzu turned off the computer, took the phone, and said with a smile, Christine, how is it? Surprise? Surprise, it's such a surprise. Christine's voice was still a little choked up. She wiped the corners of her eyes and said in the most sincere voice, Clean, thank you. Why are you polite? I said, this is my niece, it's all my duty. Kinzu waved his hand indifferently. To be honest, he was a little confused now. Anyway, I still have to thank you. Kristen's voice was very sincere. After she finished speaking, she was silent for a moment, and then she continued. Clean, I want to see Shirley, can I? Kinzu was stunned, his eyes rolled around a few times, but he said, "Of course, no problem. You tell me, do you want to come over, or should I find a time to bring Shirley to see you?" "I'll go," Kristen said without hesitation. "I'll take some time in a few days to visit your aunt." "Is that so?" Kinzu hesitated for a moment, and said, "How about this, can you come over in half a month?" "Ah? Why?" Kristen was a little anxious. If the show hadn't come to an end, she would have wanted to go there right away. Kinzu touched his nose and said helplessly, "Chris, you should know that this is the last month for bluefin tuna fishing. I'm ready and will leave for Cape Cod in the next 2 days." Christine's voice suddenly rose 8 degrees. "What about Shirley? You won't leave Shirley alone on the ranch, right? How is that possible?" Kinzu shook his head gently and said, "I will take Shirley with me, so don't worry about it. You should film well and come to see Shirley when we come back." "Okay, I'll wait until you come back," Christine agreed with some regret. After hanging up the phone, Christine looked at her schedule and her eyes became a little strange. I don't know what she was thinking. Putting down the phone and walking downstairs with Shirley, Kinzu found that Dale had already started to put food on the dining table. Curiously, he walked over to take a look and was stunned. Hey, it's really a table of stir-fried dishes. And these stir-fried dishes on the dining table, red and green, look pretty good. Clean, the dishes are almost ready, you can wash your hands and eat. Eva wiped the sweat off her face, and her blue apron was now spotted with oil stains. Kinzu was moved by her slender figure, and the guilt he felt from chatting with Zoom and Gyo just now also disappeared. "Eva, where did you learn these dishes?" Kinzu pulled out a stool and sat down at the dining table. He sniffed the tempting aroma and almost couldn't help but eat it. He nodded with satisfaction and praised, "Well done, it looks very appetizing." Eva smiled softly, took off her apron and sat down. She picked up the chopsticks and skillfully helped Kinzu pick up a piece of meat, saying, "Clean, you should eat more of this. I heard from Chef Wang that this is good for your health." "Good for your health? Chef Wang?" Kinzu was confused after hearing this. He vaguely felt that something was wrong. Looking down at the bowl, Kinzu was a little stunned. This seems to be kidney. Yes, it's the Chef Wang who helped us cook for the workers today. He asked me to give these to you. He said they are good for your health. Eva looked at the dishes on the plate and frowned. I don't know whether what he said is true or not, but Lin said it's all true. She actually had something else to say, which was, are these internal organs really okay to eat? They never eat these things, and they don't know what benefits they have for the body. Kinzu coughed twice in embarrassment. Why did Lin make trouble? Well, yes, there are indeed some benefits. Come on, eat quickly. After a few vague words, Kinzu picked up the bowl and started to eat. Eva looked at Kinzu with some curiosity. She was now more interested in the mysterious china and asked, "Clean, just tell me, what are these good for?" I asked them, but they refused to tell me. Really? Kinzu was eating and almost choked when he heard this. What a joke, they would take the initiative to tell you such a thing. However, unable to resist Eva's soft and hard nagging, Kinzu finally put down his bowl and chopsticks and explained helplessly, "Eva, there is a saying in our place that pig kidneys can nourish the kidneys. Do you understand?" Eva blinked her big eyes and looked at the plate of stir-fried kidneys in surprise. She said in disbelief, "That's it? Can it nourish the kidneys?" Kinzu was a little speechless. He had only heard about it, so how could he know if it was accurate? Well, it should be accurate. After all, we're a country with a 5,000-year civilization. He nodded as if he understood, and then Eva took the plate of kidneys aside. Kinzu stood there in a daze with chopsticks in hand, and asked blankly, what are you doing?" Eva curled her lips without blushing, and shook her head in disappointment. "If I had known it was this function, I wouldn't have spent so much time learning to cook this dish." Why?" Kinzu looked at her curiously. "Why?" Eva blinked, shook her head, and then said, "If you don't eat these things, you'll be like a beast in bed. If I give you more, I don't know how I will torture you to meet your needs." Kinzu smiled awkwardly. Eat, let's talk about this later." He looked up and saw Eva opposite him talking about this without changing her expression. He was so impressed. Si est escuchando esta novela en un canal distinto al mundo fanfic novelas, significat lo descarga and y subir en sinisfuerzos invitamos cordialmente a visitar nuestro canal. Mundo fanfic novelas all encontras la versión original de esta historia y podrás explorar muchas otras novelas de diversos narradores. Esperamos para sumergir en un mundo de novelas increíbles. Chapter 482. Good news in the morning. Eva looked calm, as if she didn't say that. Dale looked at Kinzu with a teasing look on her face. She knew that Chinese men were generally conservative in this regard. Shirley, who had just regained some energy, was happily shoveling her favorite dishes into her bowl, and had no time to deal with a few people. The meal ended in this weird atmosphere. Kinzu couldn't stand Dale's teasing eyes and started to fight back. Well, he stared at her plumpness fiercely, as if he wanted to peel off the outer layer of restraints on her. Who knew that she was not afraid of such teasing eyes, but proudly straightened her proud figure, as if to say, look, anyway, you can't eat it. Rolling his eyes, Kinzu was so angry in his heart. If Eva wasn't by his side, he would see how he would deal with this girl, although he was just thinking about it. After all, she was hiding from him now, and there was no chance to do it. Sighing helplessly, Kinzu turned and went upstairs to sleep. The next morning, Kinzu was drowsy and felt his nose itchy. He couldn't help but sneeze several times. He sat up confusedly, rubbed his sleepy eyes, and looked around in confusion. Is there anything wrong? Retracting his eyes, Kinzu suddenly found that Shirley's breathing was a little unstable, and it was obvious that she had woken up. With a turn of his eyes, Kinzu knew what was going on. He raised a smug smile at the corner of his mouth and stretched out his hand to start tickling the little guy. Hee, uncle, I was wrong. The little girl didn't pretend to sleep this time, and rolled on the bed, trying to avoid Kinzu's attack. Hee, uncle, stop tickling, spare me. Kinzu stopped his actions and laughed triumphantly. Little guy, dare to be naughty next time. The little girl looked at Kinzu with a pair of big watery eyes, her eyes full of smiles, and she looked very happy. Hearing what Kinzu said, she quickly waved her little hands and said with an expression of admitting her mistake, Uncle, I don't dare anymore, I don't dare anymore. Kinzu then sat back on the bed, yawned, and asked, Little girl, what time is it? Why did you wake up so early? Shirley turned over, went to the bedside to look at the alarm clock, and said, Uncle, it's 7 o'clock, let's get up. When Kinzu heard that it was only 7 o'clock, he leaned back and stretched comfortably. It's only 7 o'clock, why are you in a hurry? Uncle will sleep a little longer. If you remember, just go find Aunt Eva, okay? Shirley pouted and muttered, that's Sister Eva. Kinzu didn't even open his eyes, and waved his hands casually. Okay, sister is sister, just go find her when you remember. Oh, then I'll go. Shirley blinked her big eyes, not knowing what she thought of. She got up, opened the door and ran out in her pajamas. However, although the little girl went out, someone seemed to not want him to sleep well. Just when Kinzu was drowsy and about to fall asleep, the cell phone on the bedside suddenly rang with harsh music. Oh, God. Kinzu covered his head with a pillow, feeling a little tearful. Who was this, so early in the morning? Although he was a little reluctant, Kinzu had to get up and get his cell phone. There was no way. Those who knew his cell phone number were either friends or family. Boss, please read today's newspaper. As soon as the call was connected, Chen Mu's excited voice came over. What newspaper? Kinzu's eyes were blurry, and he wanted to pull this guy over and beat him up. It's the newspaper about bluefin tuna. Today, all major news media in the United States reported this incident. Chen Mu was a little anxious. It was not easy for him to deal with so many media. Oh, Kinzu yawned weakly, Brother Chen, I've told you that I'll leave all the business matters to you, just go ahead and do it. After saying that, without waiting for this guy to react, Kinzu hung up the phone. What newspapers or not, it has nothing to do with me, let's go to sleep first. On the other end of the phone, Chen Mu didn't know whether to laugh or cry, and he was so depressed. It's just like when you finish something you think is great, and then you run to show off to others excitedly, but others just say oh indifferently. That feeling makes Chen Mu almost vomit blood. Forget it, let's get tomorrow's auction done first. Chen Mu can only comfort himself in this way. Kinzu didn't know that he had made Chen Mu depressed for so long, and even made this guy call so early. Fortunately, he is sleeping with the little girl now. If he was with Eva, he might be practicing in the morning. What if he was suddenly disturbed by him and was scared to death? So, Kinzu hung up the phone without any burden. Of course, the above are all excuses that Kindakiazu found after waking up. For example, now, Kinzu is sitting on the soft leather sofa in the living room, flipping through today's newspapers. The New York Times, the Washington Post, and the local newspapers in Boston have all reported on the huge bluefin tuna in small articles. In particular, some food magazines have given this guy a front page cover, which made Qinzyu's eyes very satisfied. With so much exposure, it means a lot of money. After receiving the praise call from Qinzyu, Chen Mu felt even more depressed. Okay, you said that in the morning, it was all in vain. However, he also knew that he was just a wage earner now, so he hid his emotions very well. At least Qinzyu felt that Brother Chen was a very good person, the kind who was not surprised by praise or criticism. As soon as he hung up the phone, he saw Eva leading Shirley into the villa. The little girl was jumping and jumping, and the crisp laughter could be heard from a long distance, and she was no longer as taciturn as before. Hugging the little girl who jumped into his arms, Qinzyu scratched her little nose lovingly and asked with a smile, "What's wrong? What makes our little princess so happy?" "Uncle, I went outside to see the big turtle." Shirley blinked her cute big eyes, and the twinkling light proved that she had found a new toy she liked very much. She gestured with her hands and said with a giggle, "It's so fun, stupid and silly." Qinzyu was embarrassed. "Big turtle? You mean Chuang? This guy is stupid. How did you come to this conclusion?" But Qinzyu didn't argue. It can be seen that this girl is also very sensible and knows how to cooperate to make the little girl happy. That's all. Watching Eva walk into the kitchen to bring out breakfast, Qinzyu asked curiously, "Little girl, haven't you had breakfast yet?" Shirley touched her belly and nodded, "Yes, I'm going to wait for Uncle to have breakfast together." Thank you Langzi for the 500 points of starting coins reward, and thank you Fengxi for the reward support. Chapter 483 Going to the sea to catch shrimp. Qinzyu nodded helplessly at Shirley's little head and said with a smile, "Next time when Uncle doesn't get up, you should eat earlier." "What if you're hungry?" Shirley pouted her little mouth, looked at Qinzyu pitifully, and said, "So, Uncle, you have to get up early to eat with Shirley. If Shirley's little belly is flat, Shirley will ignore you." "Well, Uncle will try his best." Looking at the little girl's pitiful expression, the smile on Qinzyu's face froze. Isn't life just counting money until your hands cramp and sleeping until you wake up naturally? Not sleeping in. Is that still life? Shirley pouted her little mouth and muttered, "Lazy uncle, you get up the latest." Qinzyu smiled awkwardly, picked up the little girl, and kissed her pink face hard. "Ha ha, little girl, let's go, Uncle will take you to have breakfast." "Well, let's have breakfast." The little girl narrowed her eyes, touched her belly, and looked expectant. Woof woof woof. Hearing about food, Daha and Xiao's little ears stood up, and they ran over with the food bowl in their mouths. They didn't eat either? Qinzyu wiped the cold sweat from his head, looking at the little husky who looked like a starving ghost. Yeah, Shirley didn't eat either, so why would she give it to them? The little girl's big eyes narrowed into a small slit, and she obviously felt that her decision was very wise. Indeed, Qinzyu felt a lot of pressure now, especially when he looked at Daha, Xiaohe, Jerry and Tom, and even the resentful eyes of Xiao Dadu. That feeling was as if he had done something unforgivable. Shaking his head, leaving this meaningless feeling behind, Qinzyu gently tapped the little girl's head with his finger. "You, hurry up and eat, I'll go get them some food, look how hungry these guys are." Shirley looked at the pitiful little guys, stuck out her tongue, sat down at the dining table with a smile, took breakfast from Eva, and ate it in big mouthfuls. Qinzyu entered the kitchen first, found some beef for Daha and Xiaohe, put it in the pot and boiled it a little, then washed some vegetables and gave them to Dadu. As for Jerry and Tom, these two guys were directly carried to the sofa by Qinzyu's ears. "You don't know how to eat such a big fruit plate, but you join in the fun. If you do it again, you will be punished by not being allowed to eat for 3 days. Little Jerry looked at Qinzyu with innocent eyes, not to mention the grievance, if the little master doesn't say anything, would he dare to eat? Seeing the innocent look in little Jerry's eyes, Qinzyu burst into laughter, and pointed at the little guy with his finger. "Do you really think I don't know about the things you hid? Believe it or not, I will confiscate them all." Little Jerry was furious, and his pitiful expression disappeared. He didn't even look at Qinzyu, and he and his wife picked up the fruit plate and ran away, which made Qinzyu stunned. "Hey, what are you doing?" The young couple ignored Qinzyu's call, found a place to sit down with the fruit plate, and began to divide the things on the plate. Qinzyu looked at it with a frown. "Hey, leave the plate to me." After breakfast, Qinzyu was going to go to the fish tank to take a look. That guy was also a difficult person to serve. Shirley followed behind with her short legs. The two figures, one big and one small, came to the big fish tank that Eva found in the warehouse. Looking at the layer of minced fish meat at the bottom of the fish tank, Qinzyu was so angry. This guy, is he shameless? Shirley supported her little arms, squatted beside the fish tank, looked at the little turtle inside, and asked worriedly, "Uncle, why doesn't it eat?" Kinzu said unhappily, "It's not hungry, don't you see a layer of fish meat floating below?" Shirley looked at the bottom of the fish tank and muttered, "Does the little turtle not like to eat fish?" Then she looked up at Kinzu and said expectantly, "Uncle, let's go catch some shrimps for it, okay?" Kinzu wanted to refuse. It would be fine to watch TV when he was free, but to catch shrimps for a turtle. However, looking at Shirley's expectant eyes, he nodded as if possessed by a ghost. "Okay, let's go now." Shirley cheered, stood up happily, and pulled Kinzu to go out. "Let's go, Uncle, let's go catch some shrimps for the little turtle." Kinzu had no choice but to be dragged away by the little guy, so he had to shout at Eva, who was busy in the restaurant, and then snapped his fingers at the two little guys. For Kinzu, one action was enough to greet the two little guys. Sure enough, when Kinzu was dragged out by the little girl, the two little guys followed. Since they were already out, there was nothing to say. Just catch shrimps and treat it as exercise. However, looking at the direction the little girl was heading, Kinzu became a little curious. "Hey, little girl, where are you taking me?" Shirley heard this, looked back at Kinzu, and answered in a childish voice, "Go to the lake to catch shrimps." Kinzu shrugged, "Little girl, you won't let your uncle catch shrimps for you with empty hands like this." Huh. The little girl was a little confused. "If you don't use your hands to catch shrimps, then what can you use?" Seeing this, Kinzu smiled helplessly, stretched out his hand and picked up the little girl. Let's go to your Uncle Will's place and see if there are any shrimps." The little girl nodded, indicating that she agreed to Kinzu's proposal, and lay on his shoulder, waving her hands vigorously at the two little guys behind her. The two little guys, who had been having fun as soon as they went out, ran around Kinzu even more happily. When they arrived at the dock, Kinzu found Will, who was repairing the fishing net on the fishing boat. After hearing Kinzu's purpose, Will smiled and shook his head and said, "Boss, you are here at the wrong time now. When it rains, you can catch a lot by just walking around the beach with a scoop net. But now it's sunny, so we can only go to the sea to get it. Although you can get everything by just using a fishing net with a lower density, is it worth it to feed a sea turtle? Not worth it. Even if it is a hawksbill turtle, it is not worth it. Why? Because it is a protected animal, no matter how well it is raised, it cannot be sold." Kinzu sighed, "Forget it, then go to the sea to fish. Besides, I haven't been to the sea for a long time, and I really miss it." Seeing Kinzu hesitated, Will thought he was in trouble, so he put down the fishing net in his hand, clapped his hands, stood up, and asked with a smile, "Boss, how about you wait here for a while? I'll go to the sea and get some for you." Kinzu shook his head, "Forget it, no need. Help me find a diving suit and I'll do it myself in the water." Will nodded, without any objection, and turned around to find a diving suit for Kinzu. Chapter 484. The ocean is dangerous, be careful when entering the water. From this point, we can see the difference between foreign countries and China. If the boss asked for some shrimps in China, wouldn't the employees immediately think of a way? Shaking his head, Kinzu put aside his wild thoughts, looked at Shirley, and said with a smile, "Little girl, you stay on the shore and watch, Uncle will go down to catch some shrimps for you." Shirley nodded her little head, looked at the sea excitedly, and looked very expectant. Kinzu didn't notice the change in the little girl's expression, took the diving suit from Will, and put it on directly. Pulling down the goggles, Kinzu took a landing net and prepared to jump off the pier. "Hey, boss, this is not okay." Will grabbed Kinzu and explained to him with a surprised expression, "Boss, this is a deep water dock. There are no coral reefs and no fish schools below. You have to go over there and look for it bit by bit in the shallow water." Kinzu flicked up his goggles, nodded, and complained, "Okay, why didn't you say so earlier?" Will shrugged helplessly. How could he know that Kinzu wanted to go down directly from here? Leaving the little girl on the boat, Kinzu got off the dock and walked towards the reefs over there in a slightly cool sea breeze in the early morning. According to Will, the reefs and coral reefs are one of the favorite places for these marine animals such as shrimps and crabs. When he arrived next to the reefs, Kinzu did not rush into the water, but stepped on the reefs and began to stare and pay attention to the movements under the sea. Under the sunlight in the early morning, the seawater was so clear that Kinzu could clearly see the small shrimps jumping around from time to time. This group of bodies was almost translucent, about 8 centimeters long, with many concave parts on the surface, and some short-haired shrimps on them. According to Qinzyu's visual estimation, it should be the mud shrimp commonly known in China. I didn't expect that shrimps that cost dozens of yuan per pound in China can be seen everywhere here. It seems that the United States is indeed rich in resources. Think about it, the area is about the same as that of China, but the population is only 1/13 of that of China. With this calculation, how can the resources not be rich? The mud shrimps seem to have sensed the approach of danger. There was a big commotion in the shrimp group. Some sturdy shrimps had begun to retreat and flee. Qinzyu was not happy with this. Damn it, you eat and drink my money, and sleep on my territory. Now it's your turn to pay, and you still want to run away. In a flash, Qinzyu exerted his strength and threw the net directly towards the shrimps under the sea. Imagination is always beautiful, but reality is always cruel. Although Qinzyu's movements were fast, he was still not as fast as the shrimps in the sea. This net only caught a few unlucky ones who had no time to dodge. No matter how small the mosquito legs are, they are still meat. Qinzyu grabbed a few unlucky ones and stuffed them into a small net bag on his waist, letting them jump around in it. This net bag was specially made by wool to hold bait, mainly for shrimps, so the mesh is also very small. It was because it looked good for holding shrimps that Qinzyu borrowed it temporarily. Grabbing the net beside him, Qinzyu did not lose heart. He changed a reef and continued to observe. This time, Qinzyu's movements were much smaller. He changed a reef lightly and looked down. Qinzyu shivered and almost lost his balance. Damn, there was actually a sea snake below, and it was looking at him with its head raised, as if it could pounce at any time. Slowly retreating, Qinzyu began to frantically call out to Cheese in his heart. How did this guy manage his group of brothers? Why were there so many of them? Damn, although he knew he would not die, Qinzyu did not want to experience the feeling of being bitten by a snake. Fortunately, the sea snake just looked at him like that, and did not attack. Just when Qinzyu secretly breathed a sigh of relief, he felt his feet slip, and with a plop, he fell into the sea water. The sea snake, which was already a little nervous, was frightened by the sudden loud noise and pounced directly towards Qinzyu. After the transformation, Qinzyu's physical reaction has also improved significantly. And the best manifestation of this improvement is at this time. Qinzyu, who had just fallen into the water and had not yet stood firm, exerted force on his feet and jumped forward. Anyway, the water here is not deep, only about 30 to 40 centimeters, so it is convenient for Qinzyu to run. However, the flicks used for swimming seriously slowed down Qinzyu's speed. When he saw a black shadow getting closer and closer, Cheese finally emerged from the woods nearby. Hiss! He raised his head and roared at the sea surface when Cheese was still far away. The effect of Cheese's shouting was immediate. The sea snake that was chasing closely behind was now trembling and crawling in front of it. Seeing this, Qinzyu stopped running, supported his thighs with both hands, and sat down on the beach on the side with a gasp. Damn, this won't work. At least I have to be able to protect myself. I can't even beat a snake, right? Cheese scolded the sea snake and swam in front of Qinzyu with a low eyebrow, looking like a boss. I was wrong. It looked so funny. You, remember this, you must be careful, you must control these guys, and never let them come out to harm people again. Looking at Qinzyu with a half-understanding look, Cheese nodded his big head, as if you're the boss, you can do whatever you think is good. Qinzyu ignored the two guys, but stared at the large reef in front of him in a daze. This guy is responsible for all this. It seems that I have to find a chance to deal with it. Thinking of this, Qinzyu's sharp eyes glanced at the sea snake that was being scolded, wondering if he should find something to do for this guy. But after thinking for a long time, there was nothing to do. It seemed that there was no big use except killing and eating it. Sighing helplessly, Qinzyu had to admit that he was unlucky, and climbed onto a reef again, ready to continue his search. Seeing this, the cheese next to him also left the sea snake that was being scolded and hurried up. Hearing the sound of the seawater sliding behind him, Qinzyu was a little confused. He looked back and found that Cheese was only one step away from him. Especially the big head, which came close to Qinzyu and almost knocked him down. Qinzyu said angrily, "Hurry back and get ready. Keep those sea snakes under guard for me. If there are any more sea snakes causing trouble, I will kill you." Chapter 485 Pipe of Shrimp, let's go. After Cheese left reluctantly, Qinzyu continued to look for prey. If this guy was around, it would be good to find dead fish and shrimp, not to mention small fish and shrimp. After circling the reefs, Qinzyu came to a place a little further away. The seawater here was still as calm as waves, and was not disturbed by the movement just now. As soon as he found a reef to lie down, Kinzu saw a lot of mud shrimps moving through the clear seawater. He was happy in his heart. These guys are really flooding. Fearing that the night is long and dreams are many, Kinzu did not hesitate and directly covered them with a scoop net. Looking at the mud shrimps jumping around in the scoop net, Kinzu smiled with satisfaction and began to put them into his net bag. Well, not bad, more than 30 should be enough. Looking at the mud shrimps in a net bag, Kinzu muttered to himself, but the more he looked, the more he felt greedy. He hadn't eaten for a long time. Forget it, let's look for it and take it back with a net. Having made up his mind, Kinzu started to search along the reefs. Judging from the situation, there was no need to go to the sea. Just after turning a small corner, Kinzu stepped onto a reef similar to a crab, and looked down at the seabed along 2 small reefs derived from it. Kinzu looked at the group of shrimps gathered on the seabed with a light exclamation, scratching his head. What is this? Mantis shrimp? Looking at the group of mantis shrimps with strange bodies that swept the expression world, Kinzu's interest was immediately raised. Without saying anything, he used a scoop net to cover them before these guys noticed. When he fished it out, Kinzu's smile became even bigger. The scoop net was half full. Just when he was about to reach out to grab it, Kinzu suddenly thought of the online emoticon, the mantis shrimp holding a big hammer. It is said that this thing is more brutal than the killer crab. Forget it, you just stay in the scoop net, I will deal with you when I get back. Kinzu put the scoop net on his shoulder and went home. Mantis shrimp, let's go. Before they even reached the dock, Shirley came running over with her little legs. Before she even arrived, her voice came over, Uncle, did you catch any shrimp? Kinzu raised a large net bag of shrimps, took out the scoop net and shook it, smiling and saying, look, there are so many. The little girl clapped her hands excitedly and shouted, Uncle is so awesome. Okay, let's go back to the dock first. Kinzu waved his hand, motioning the little girl to go ahead. Along the way, the mantis shrimps were not very obedient, and several of them had already jumped out. The little girl nodded and walked forward, jumping as she walked, looking full of energy. When they arrived at the dock, Will came over and looked at the shrimps in Kinzu's net, and said with a smile, Boss, it looks like you've got a lot. Kinzu raised the scoop net, not bad, caught some interesting things. Will curiously looked over, exclaimed, and asked, Boss, you haven't caught them with your hands, have you? Kinzu shook his head, of course not, I heard that mantis shrimps have strong attack power. Mantis shrimp? Will blinked, a little confused. Kinzu pointed to the scoop net, indicating that this is what he was talking about. Oh. Will shook his head in relief, and said with a smile, Boss, this kind of shrimp is called mantis shrimp here. Is this mantis shrimp? Kinzu was a little stunned. He really didn't know that mantis shrimp was actually the legendary mantis shrimp. Yes, mantis shrimps are ferocious and have very sharp eyesight. Because they are good at swimming, most of their prey are bottom-dwelling creatures that are not good at swimming, including various shellfish, crabs, sea urchins, etc. They can easily destroy the outer hard shell of their prey and enjoy the meat inside. Moreover, mantis shrimps are extremely aggressive and often appear fearless. They can catch cephalopods that are 10 times larger and 10 times heavier than their bodies. In addition, they have a pair of powerful clamps, which are quite powerful when launching an attack. They can shatter glass and even pinch off human fingers. Poseidon said, so, some biologists say that mantis shrimps can rank second in the animal attack speed rankings, second only to the mandibles of soldier ants. Some species of mantis shrimp even have a pair of hammers hidden under their bodies that can attack at a speed of 60 kilometers. When it attacks its prey, it can eject the hammer within 100th of a second, and the impact force of the ejection can reach up to 60 kilograms. The high temperature generated by friction can even cause sparks in the surrounding water. Gong. Kinzu swallowed hard and looked at the scoop net with some fear. 60 kilograms. Fortunately, he was not reckless just now, otherwise, it is hard to say whether his hands can be saved. Will seemed to have thought of something at this time and asked, by the way, boss, what are you going to do with these shrimps? Are you going to eat them yourself? Before Kinzu could speak, Shirley, who had been watching curiously beside him, said anxiously, no, we are going to feed them to the little turtle. Will's mouth twitched involuntarily. What a joke. Feeding mantis shrimp to turtles. Or little turtles. With one hammer, the little guy would probably be dead, right? Ahem, well, let's not feed this to the turtle, let's feed it with this. Kinzu smiled awkwardly and lifted the shrimp in his hand. He really didn't dare to feed the mantis shrimp to the hawksbill turtle now, otherwise it would be hard to tell who would eat it and who would be happy. Bull was relieved and said with a smile, "Boss, you'd better eat these guys yourself. Look, if you hold them like this, they can't attack you." As he said that, Bull suddenly stretched out his hand and grabbed a mantis shrimp that was constantly waving its small claws, and lifted up the flailing little guy. Kinzu was stunned. "Didn't they say it was very ferocious? How dare you pinch it?" "Ha ha, boss, just pinch their heads here, they can't hit you, and they can't break free." Bull smiled and stretched out his other hand. Under Kinzu's stunned gaze, he peeled the mantis shrimp in a few strokes. Looking at the tender shrimp meat, Kinzu handed the scoop net to Will without saying anything. Without waiting for him to refuse, he said, "Well, Will, you see, I have to go feed the little turtles and don't have time, so you can help me peel them." Will didn't know whether to laugh or cry, looking at his boss, who was still working. He regretted it now. Why did he like to show off so much? Why did he show off for no reason? Is it okay now? Although he thought so in his heart, Will still took the scoop net with a smile on his face, and said, "Okay, boss, I'll send it to you when it's done." Kinzu smiled with satisfaction and patted Will on the shoulder. "Okay, then it's settled." Chapter 486. Equally matched. This is troublesome. When Kinzu and Shirley walked away, Will put the scoop net on his shoulder and yelled at the top of his voice, "Simon, where are you? Get out of here." Simon, who was cleaning the fish tank on the fishing boat, shuddered. The 1.89-meter tall man was half a head shorter. Without caring about cleaning the fish tank, Simon ran out happily and looked at Will on the deck with a smile on his face. "What's wrong? What's wrong?" Will didn't say anything and handed the scoop net over. "Go, clean these mantis shrimps. The boss wants them." After taking the mantis shrimps, Simon didn't even ask, but ran to the dock and found a place to clean them. Will found a place and sat comfortably on it. He opened a bottle of beer and looked at the sea in the distance while drinking. This kind of peaceful life was a kind of enjoyment for him. After Kinzu returned to the villa, he came to the front of the fish tank with the shrimps. He looked at the small hawksbill turtle, which was not much bigger than a human palm, and searched in the net bag. But the more he searched, the more headache Kinzu had. He said, "Why do you guys grow so big for no reason?" He remembered that the shrimps sold in China were not so big, right? How come each of them is more than 8 centimeters long now? Are you trying to defy the heavens? In the end, Kinzu had no choice but to take a few of them and throw them into the fish tank. He just hoped that this little hawksbill turtle could live up to the title of its father, the fierce predator. Unfortunately, Kinzu still thought too much. After all, the little hawksbill turtle was still small. How could it have such a great killing power? As soon as the shrimps fell into the water, they quickly swam backwards in the fish tank. Having just escaped from the sea of suffering, their only thought now is to find a safe place to hide. But the fish tank is so small, and it is not like those big fish tanks with rockery and other things. This is just a very ordinary fish tank. So, naturally, the two sides collided with each other and quickly got into a physical entanglement. When the little hawksbill turtle tried several times and failed to bite the shrimp, it meant that the battle ended in a draw. Shirley was a little anxious watching from the side, clenching her fists, looking like she was cheering for the little hawksbill turtle. But the performance of the little hawksbill turtle obviously disappointed the little girl. She pouted and looked at Kinzu with disappointment. "Uncle, why is the little turtle so stupid? The shrimps are in front of it, but it can't eat them." Kinzu smiled bigly. "Can you say that he is stupid? One is slow in action, and the other is so big and runs fast. It would be strange if he could eat them." Standing in front of the fish tank, Kinzu supported his hands and touched his chin. "Since this shrimp is so big, it can't eat it. What about the river shrimp?" Just as he was thinking about it, Simon came in with a net bag filled with mantis shrimps that had been cleaned and had their heads and tails cut off. "Boss, this is done. Shall I put it in the kitchen?" Kinzu nodded casually, motioning him to put it away first. When Simon handed the mantis shrimp to Eva and was about to leave, Kinzu spoke. "Simon, come here, I have something to tell you." Simon wiped his hands, threw the tissue into the trash can, walked over, and asked curiously, "Boss, what do you want to talk to me about?" Kinzu smiled and motioned him to sit down first. After Simon sat down, Kinzu sat down on the sofa opposite and asked, "Simon, are there any old fishing nets with finer mesh of the dog?" "Fine mesh?" "Boss, How fine do you want? Simon looked at Kinzu with some curiosity. Kinzu thought for a moment and said, I want the smallest one. I want to use it to catch small fish. Do you have any? Simon thought for a moment and said uncertainly, there should be some, boss. Wait for me to go back and look for some. Simon stood up and prepared to look in the small warehouse at the dock. Kinzu nodded slightly, well, go ahead. Remember to use a larger area. 2 or 3 square meters would be even better. After Simon left, Eva came over and asked curiously, why do you want such a small fish net? Kinzu smiled and said, of course it's to catch fish. Don't you see that our little guy can't take the food? We need to find suitable food for it. Eva pouted and didn't say anything. It was obvious that her little man was just interested. She walked up and picked up the neck bag of shrimp and asked, what do we do with this? Do we put it away? Kinzu waved to Eva and motioned her to come over. Eva took 2 steps forward in confusion and came to Kinzu. Before she could ask, she felt another slap on her vitals. Pouting, Eva imitated Haley's expression and looked at him aggrievedly, why did you hit me again? Kinzu's dirty hands were kneading slowly from an angle that Shirley couldn't see, but he said unhappily, you'll lose a woman, that's a shrimp. If you dare to let it go like this, I will deal with you now. Eva rolled her eyes and ignored the guy's nonsense. She hummed twice as if she enjoyed it, which made Kinzu feel itchy. But she looked at the sky. Damn, it was only early in the morning. She quickly took her hand back, reluctantly savored it for a while, and then said, first, wash it with water, and then put it directly in the water to cook it. After agreeing, Eva carried a bag of shrimps and walked to the kitchen in Shirley's reluctant expression. Kinzu looked at Shirley and asked with a smile, little girl. What's wrong? Shirley looked at the kitchen with some grievance and said in her childish voice, Uncle, Sister Eva took the shrimps away, what about the little turtle? Kinzu stretched out his arms to embrace the little girl and explained with a smile, don't worry, Uncle will take you to catch some shrimps for the little turtle, okay? Shirley looked up at Kinzu with some surprise and asked uncertainly, Uncle, are you serious? Kinzu smiled and nodded, kissed the little girl's fair face hard, and then said, of course it's true, how could I lie to our little princess? Shirley nestled in Kinzu's arms with a smile on her face, but said, Uncle, you are so kind, the little turtle will definitely repay you when it grows up. Kinzu smiled and didn't respond. Expected to repay. Not retaliating is good enough. Time passed bit by bit, Kinzu and Shirley chatted about some meaningless topics. Eva was busy cleaning shrimps in the kitchen, and occasionally popped her head out to interject. For a moment, the atmosphere in the villa was unprecedentedly warm, giving people the feeling of a family of 3. It seemed like a century, and it seemed like a minute, and this warm feeling was broken by voice. Boss, I found it, I found what you need. Thanks to Brother Tycoon and Fenxi for their support, thank you. Chapter 487 Triangle Net. Simon ran into the villa excitedly with a ball of sand in his hand, not noticing the warm smell in the air. Being suddenly interrupted, Kinzu withdrew from the atmosphere, and asked with some dissatisfaction and curiosity, oh? How big is the fishing net? Simon excitedly opened the fishing net, and Kinzu was surprised to find that this guy was really not small, as large as 5 or 6 square meters. And it can be seen that it was obviously just torn off, and it must have been found from the broken fishing net before. Kinzu's guess was really right. This fishing net was really found in an inconspicuous corner of the warehouse by Simon with great effort, so he was so excited. Of course, Kinzu couldn't just bypass this guy. Waving his hand, holding Shirley, Kinzu took Simon out of the villa. After arriving at the warehouse, Kinzu found the remaining wooden strips from the last vegetable rack, took out one and tried it with his hand. It's a bit fragile. Kinzu sighed to himself. He reached out and picked up another one, put the 2 together to try, and then smiled with satisfaction. Okay, that's it. Having made up his mind, Kinzu waved his hand, and Simon, who looked confused, came over. He really couldn't understand what this boss was doing. Well, Simon, use this to fit it into a triangle, and then find a way to install a fishing net on it. Kinzu pointed to the fishing net and a pile of wooden strips on the ground, then gestured with the 2 wooden strips in his hand, and then asked uncertainly, do you understand? Can you do it? After Kinzu's gestures and guesses, Simon suddenly understood. When he heard Kinzu ask if he could do it, he nodded immediately. Don't worry, boss, it's really too simple. Since he said it was simple, Kinzu had no problem. After handing the things to Simon, he took the little girl back to the villa. It feels so good to be rich. Kinzu sighed again. If you want something, someone will do it immediately. This life is simply like a god. Before Kinzu could stay at home for a while, Simon came out of the door with a tripod in his hand and shouted, "Boss, the things are ready, do you want to come and take a look?" Kinzu was stunned when he heard this. So fast? He looked at Simon standing outside with some suspicion. Would this guy fool him? When Kinzu came out, Simon smiled and held up the tripod in his hand, and asked proudly, "Boss, how is it?" "Not bad, right?" Kinzu took it and looked at it. The three corners of the tripod were fixed with nails and screws, and when covering the fishing net, it was fixed manually. The whole tripod looked very beautiful, and it was many times more advanced than the one he used in China. Nodding with satisfaction, Kinzu praised Simon, "Well done." However, when he looked up, Kinzu looked at Simon with some confusion and asked, "Have you learned carpentry before?" Simon waved his hand casually and explained with a smile, "Boss, you don't need to learn these, you will learn them naturally." Kinzu was a little unconvinced and said, "How is this possible? How can you learn them naturally?" Simon shrugged helplessly and said, "Boss, you can imagine that if you have been working since you were a child, you will naturally know everything." Kinzu. After sending Simon away, Kinzu looked at Shirley beside him and asked, "Little girl, do you want to go play with your uncle or stay at home?" Shirley patted her chest and said, "Of course together, I want to watch my uncle catch fish." Kinzu nodded. He had thought of this result a long time ago. After returning to the villa and saying hello to Weaver, Kinzu led the little girl, who led Daha, who was then held by the tail of the little girl. A strange team came to the warehouse. "Little girl, wait outside. I'll drive the mountain bike out." Kinzu was a little worried and told Shirley again, "Little girl, don't run around." When Kinzu came to the lake with the freshly baked triangular trawl and the little girl, it was not even 10 o'clock. Just as he put on his diving suit and got ready to show his skills, the phone next to him rang again. "Brother Chen, what's wrong?" Kinzu's voice was a little anxious. Why did he call at this time? Chen Mu on the other end of the phone was stunned for a moment, and suddenly thought of something. He smiled ambiguously and asked in a somewhat obscene voice, "Boss, this early in the morning, did I disturb your good thing?" Kinzu was a little confused by Chen Mu's words. What was going on? Kinzu interrupted him with a helpless smile, "If you have something to say, just say it." "I'm just about to go into the water to catch shrimps." "Go into the water? Catch shrimps? You?" This time it was Chen Mu's turn to be confused. What on earth was going on? A billionaire, going into the water to catch shrimps? Kinzu touched his nose. "Yes, I have a little turtle at home, come to get it some food, Brother Chen, what's the matter?" Chen Mu heard the impatience in Kinzu's tone, so he stopped joking and said seriously, "Boss, I want to ask you, will you come to the auction tomorrow?" "Me?" Kinzu didn't even hesitate, and said directly, "I won't go, you can do it yourself, I only look at the results." "Come on, big boss, you continue to touch the shrimp, then I'll hang up first." When Chen Mu hung up the phone, Kinzu was still mumbling, "What's the matter? You still need to call for this. It's a waste of my time." "Uncle, are you okay?" Shirley, who was squatting next to him, urged impatiently. I'm coming, don't worry." Kinzu agreed loudly, and then began to call Xiaojin. Although the water here is not very deep, it is still quite deep. Kinzu decided to change to a more labor-saving way. Soon, the water surface began to surge. Under the gaze of Shirley's eyes, Xiaojin's huge and bright body appeared in front of the two. Uncle, what is that? It's so big." Shirley took 2 steps forward without fear, came to Kinzu's side, and stared at the unknown creature in the water. Hey, little girl, aren't you afraid?" Kinzu looked at Shirley beside him with some curiosity. Shirley shook her head. "What are you afraid of? Uncle is here, and besides, it looks so cute, what is there to be afraid of?" Kinzu was a little embarrassed, and his heart was also a little warm. It seems that his position in the little girl's heart is not low. "Little girl, go to the side a little, I want to go down." After pushing Shirley to the side, Kinzu leaned against the small tree next to him and went down to the big lake. Chapter 488 Start working. The morning breeze blew slowly across the water, creating waves of ripples. Next to the clear jade-like lake, Daha and Xiaohe accompanied their little master and curiously looked into the lake. There was a huge koi, which was carrying their master on its back, and it was unknown what bad things it was going to do. The most annoying thing was that it did not even take them with it. Qinzu sat astride Xiaojin, and the cool lake water still soaked his waist, feeling the water flowing slowly like silk. With both hands raised, Qinzu signaled Xiaojin to swim to where the water plants gathered under the eager eyes of 3 pairs of people on the shore. If you have lived on a farm, you should have seen this way of fishing. In other words, this method is specially used to catch some small shrimps and eels. Because they often like to live in water plants, this kind of scoop net is aimed at this living habit, directly from the water, to lift up a bunch of water plants. In this way, the small fish, shrimps, eels and the like inside will not be able to escape. So, when Qinzu slowly put the scoop net into the water, he was very excited. Why? Because he hadn't played for a long time, so he was a little unfamiliar. Fortunately, these small fish and shrimps have lived in the water plants as adults, and have regarded these water plants as their homes and as umbrellas. So after sensing the movement from outside, they not only did not choose to escape, but would go deeper into the water plants to seek its shelter. In this way, Qinzu's actions were more convenient. He used both hands to pull up the triangular scoop net, so that all the water plants entered the scoop net. Then he motioned Xiaojin to go to the shore again. After getting close to the shore, Qinzu leaned the scoop net against the shore, and let go directly, and put it on Xiaojin's back that was out of the water. Then he reached out and grabbed a small tree next to the shore, and climbed up directly with one effort. "Uncle, did you catch them?" Shirley couldn't wait and ran over with the 2 little followers. "Of course, you don't even look at who your uncle is." Qinzu raised his eyebrows proudly, smiled and waved his hand. "Come on, come here, let your uncle get them up." "Yeah, uncle is the best." Shirley took a few steps back as he said, but still looked at Qinzu with admiration. She looked like she was almost a fan of Qinzu. Qinzu subconsciously touched his nose, but he was wearing leather gloves, so he got water all over his face. He smiled awkwardly, and without hesitation, Qinzu bent down and grabbed the trawl net with both hands, and said "Hey-oh." With the sound of splashing water, the scoop net and the water plants were directly pulled ashore by Qinzu. Uncle, why did you get these plants up?" Shirley's eyes, which were originally full of expectation, became a little confused in an instant after seeing the water plants in the trawl net. Qinzu smiled, walked forward, stretched out his hand and began to pull the water grass out. "You, don't be impatient, watch uncle perform magic for you." Shirley nodded her head, not quite understanding. Seeing Qinzu busy, she also stretched out her white and tender little hands and began to pull the water grass out one by one. Seeing this, Daha and Xiaohe also ran up happily, holding a grass in their mouths and pulling it out. It was originally a boring thing, but the 2 little guys were still having fun. "Ah!" Shirley, who was pulling the water grass out, suddenly exclaimed. Under Qinzu's concerned eyes, she pointed under the water grass and said excitedly, "Uncle, look, there is something inside." Qinzu heard this, and his expression relaxed, and said with a smile, "Of course there is something, you little fool. If there is nothing, why would your uncle go to such great lengths?" Shirley grinned and laughed, without saying a word, watching the movement under the water grass with joy. Qinzu saw this and hurriedly sped up the process. After a while, all the water plants were cleared out. Under the scoop net, a small pile of various small fish and shrimps appeared, jumping around in panic in the scoop net. Their little heads couldn't figure out why the water plants that usually sheltered them from the wind and rain suddenly disappeared. "Well, how is it? Is it enough?" Qinzu looked at Shirley next to him with a smile. Shirley nodded her little head. "Yeah, it's enough, uncle is the best." Qinzu smiled and didn't take it seriously. Instead, he walked over and took a small bucket, bent down to receive half a bucket of lake water, and began to pick up small fish and shrimps. Qinzu didn't waste this kind of river shrimp, and put them all into the net bag directly, ready to take it back to add another dish. Those small fish and so on were put in a small bucket, ready to be stored temporarily. "When I get home, I will distribute them again." After finishing his work, Qinzu stood up, took the scoop net aside and shook it vigorously, shaking off all the miscellaneous things. Turning his head to look at Shirley who was staring at him intently, Qinzu felt a little flustered and quickly changed the subject. "Little girl, watch carefully, uncle will go down and get another net." "Oh." Shirley came back to her senses and nodded obediently. Then she squatted next to the wooden barrel, observing the fight in the barrel with an interested look. As before, Qinzu once again grabbed the small tree next to him and went into the water, riding on Xiaojin. This time Xiaojin seemed to have become obedient, and before Qinzu could tell him to, he swam towards a large group of water plants. Qinzu was helpless and looked at his triangular scoop net, which was less than 3 square meters in total. What's the point of bringing me here? But since he was already here, Qinzu would not say anything else. Who cares? He would get a scoop net first. Qinzu put the scoop net into the water and placed it in front of Xiaojin. He rode on Xiaojin's back and motioned him to increase his strength and speed, and rushed to the shore. A ripple suddenly appeared on the calm lake surface. A figure was half exposed in the water, pushing a large pile of seaweed in front of him, and moving quickly towards the shore. Qinzu followed the same method, and his arm muscles bulged, and he dragged up the seaweed in the trawl net with force. While sorting the seaweed, Qinzu was still cursing in his heart. Damn, how did I do it in the first place? It shouldn't be so tiring. However, no one could tell him why now, so Qinzu could only be a little depressed and sort the seaweed in the scoop net. However, when Qinzu saw the situation in the scoop net clearly, he became a little stunned. What's going on? Who has such a bad taste? He even dyed the crayfish with color? Si est escuchando esta novela en un canal distinto a mundo fanfic novelas, significat lo descarga and y subir en sinisfuerzos invitamos cordialmente a visitar nuestro canal. Mundo fanfic novelas all encontrar la versión original de esta historia y podrás explorar muchas otras novelas de diversos narradores. Te esperamos para sumergirte en un mundo de novelas incredibles. Chapter 489 Blue Devil Shrimp. That's right. Now, in addition to some small fish and a few big fat crucian carps, there are actually quite a few light blue crayfish in front of Qinzu. Wow, uncle, look, these lobsters are so beautiful. Shirley cheered and reached out to take them. No, little girl, wait for me to see first. Qinzu stopped Shirley. Why is this little girl not afraid? Qinzu reached out and picked up a light blue crayfish, put it in front of his eyes and looked carefully. He found that there was no big difference from other lobsters except for the color. Moreover, this light blue color that looks like the sky, Qinzu tried it with his hands, and it didn't look like it was artificially painted. Strange, is it really natural? Qinzu muttered to himself. Looking into the scoop net, there are about a dozen of these lobsters, and they are all large shrimps with a body length of about 10 to 20 centimeters, no small shrimps. Forget it, don't think about it, blue is blue, go back and check it online. Qinzu threw the light blue lobster into another net bag, and he ignored it and started to sort out the small fish. Shirley pouted her mouth and looked at the blue lobsters crawling in the net bag with curiosity. This bright color made her very interested. However, Qinzu had just explained it, so she didn't dare to reach out to capture it, and could only watch from the side. Not only her, but also their two brothers Daha and Xiaohe came over and looked at the little guys with interest. Daha stretched out a front paw, patted the net bag tentatively, and then quickly retracted it. After finding that there was no danger, the little guy became much bolder. Encouraged by the little girl's eyes, Daha moved his body, crawled to the front, and prepared to give these weird guys a surprise attack. After Qinzu was done, he found something strange next to him. Daha crawled towards the blue crayfish and was about to stretch out his claws. Shirley and Xiaohe next to him both had encouraging expressions, and Xiaohe even watched with great interest. Qinzu didn't know whether to laugh or cry, so he picked up Daha and patted its chubby little butt twice. This naughty little thing, these blue crayfish can't die, maybe they're some rare treasures, if only I have them, then I will be rich. After being taught a lesson, Daha immediately became honest, lowered his head and didn't look at Qinzu, and ran to the side to complain to his brother. Shirley next to him saw that the situation was not good, and immediately changed her encouraging expression to a pitiful little look, which made Qinzu almost laugh. Okay, I'll let you see enough when I go back, really. Qinzu smiled and pinched her fair little face with his hand, leaving a trace of water. Yeah, uncle, are we going back now? Shirley didn't care about the water on her face at all, but looked up at Qinzu with expectation. Qinzu looked at her curiously. Wasn't it you who wanted to come? You want to go back now? Looking down at the little guy in the net bag, Qinzu suddenly realized, and looked at the little girl with a bit of a smile. Isn't it too fast to get tired of the old and love the new? But there is no way, who let the little girl be the boss, since she said she would go back, then let's go back. Nodding, Qinzu smiled and agreed. Okay, since our little princess said she wanted to go back, let's go back. After packing up, Kinzu put the bucket and the neck bag in front of the four-wheeled motorcycle, and then let Shirley hold the two little guys and return to the villa. After entering the door, Eva came up and took the things from the two people. Now she rarely goes to the small ranch, where Danny Lester is watching. Kinzu also knows why she doesn't go. It is indeed a bit embarrassing to let his daughter take care of her father, and the ranch that belonged to their family before, so he didn't say anything. Why did you get so many little things? Are they edible? Looking at the neck bag of river shrimps and small crabs, Eva frowned slightly. She didn't know how to cook. Kinzu smiled and waved his hand. Don't worry, these are all for feeding the little turtles. Eva nodded, and then she felt relieved. Although she had tried her best to learn Chinese cuisine, there were so many varieties of Chinese cuisine that she really couldn't master it in a short time. Just as she was about to take the things in her hand to deal with them, she accidentally saw the bag of light blue crayfish, and Eva immediately exclaimed, "Clean, where did you get these blue magic shrimps? Are there any here too?" Blue magic shrimps? Kinzu blinked blankly, followed Eva's gaze, and focused his eyes on the bag of light blue crayfish. You mean, this is called blue magic shrimp? Kinzu looked at Eva curiously, a little disappointed. Could it be that this is still a common product? Yes, this should be Florida blue crayfish. How did it get here? Eva blinked her big blue eyes in confusion, very surprised. It turns out that this blue devil shrimp refers to a freshwater lobster with a bright blue shell that originated in Florida, USA. It is commonly known as Florida crayfish abroad. When importers introduced this variety, they called it blue devil shrimp, which is also the original origin of the term blue devil shrimp. Blue devil shrimp was originally exported from the United States to Germany as an ornamental shrimp. However, the first batch of blue devil shrimp introduced to Germany were all male shrimps, without a single female shrimp. This was also a strategy adopted by American exporters to prevent this type of shrimp from breeding abroad. Although there are many blue devil shrimps on the market now, they are all artificially cultivated, and wild ones have only been found in Florida. Oh? Is this shrimp valuable? Kinzu asked a question that he was concerned about. As for how it appeared, what does it have to do with him? Eva shook her head and said with a smile, Clean, you will be disappointed. Although there are not many shrimps of this kind, they are not very precious, and they are mostly used for ornamental purposes, so the price is not very high. Kinzu was a little unwilling, pointing to the neck bag, and said, Those are not small, the big ones are almost more than 20 centimeters long. Eva laughed and exclaimed, Clean, ornamental shrimps are different from edible shrimps. It's not that the bigger the shrimps are, the more expensive they are. Because most of the people who like this kind of shrimps are children. If the shrimps are too big, they will lose interest. Kinzu sighed with some disappointment. Sure enough, not all good things come to him. Forget it, these are all caught in the lake. I guess they flowed down the mountain. Eva nodded and said thoughtfully, Well, that should be the case. Chapter 490 Heidi returns again carrying a bucket of fish of all sizes. Kinzu came to the fish tank. Looking at the slightly old and narrow fish tank, he frowned slightly. Looking at the busy workers outside, he didn't know how long it would take to realize his plan for a big fish tank. Forget it, just buy a small one to use first. Picking up the phone, Kinzu called Old John. Hi, boss, good morning. Old John's voice was a little tired. He was busy repairing and upgrading the fence these days, and he had no time to rest early in the morning. Kinzu didn't know this. He thought that with so many people on the ranch, he didn't need to go there in person for such a small matter, so he said, Old John, do you have time now? Go to Revere to buy me a larger fish tank with a rockery or something. Old John heard this, looked at the work at hand, smiled bitterly, but still asked seriously, Boss, how big is it? Are there any requirements for the material? Kinzu thought about it, and he didn't know much about it, so he said, As for the size, 2 or 3 meters long will be fine, and more than 1 meter wide. I'll put it in the living room. Old John agreed, asked some more details, and then hung up the phone. But after looking at the work at hand, he shook his head, picked up the phone and called his son. After Kinzu finished his instructions, he didn't think about it anymore, reached out and grabbed a few small fish, and put them directly into the fish tank. As soon as they entered the fish tank, the small fish began to flee everywhere, and for a moment, they startled the shrimps and small hawksbill turtles that had originally returned to their peace. Looking at the fish tank in chaos, Kinzu chuckled a few times, and ignored it, but walked into the kitchen with the fish bucket. There were a lot of good things in that small fish bucket, and Kinzu felt his appetite was whetted just thinking about it. When he came outside, Kinzu reached into the bucket and took out a slippery thing. Before he could hold it firmly, the thing fell to the ground with a snap, twisting and crawling quickly there. Daha, who had returned home a little listless, suddenly became energetic, jumped out with a whoosh, stretched out his little claws and pressed towards the thing on the ground. But accidents often happen so unexpectedly. Just when Daha thought he had won, he suddenly felt his front paws paddling forward uncontrollably, and performed a gorgeous duck paddle on the shore in front of Kinzu. Climbing up in confusion, Daha looked at the ground in confusion. Why did he fall? Why did he fall? Kinzu was watching from the side and was overjoyed. That was an eel. How could it be caught casually? If that were the case, he would not have become an internet celebrity. But Xiaohe, who was standing by, saw that his brother had suffered a loss, and he immediately refused to do it. He barked and rushed towards the eel crawling on the ground. The eel, which was running fast, was frightened by the sudden sound and stopped immediately. It turned around and crawled to the other side. This made Xiaohe suffer. Just as he was about to pounce, he saw the eel suddenly rushing towards him. Now he became a little timid. Why didn't this guy play by the rules? This is how puppies usually are. When you meet a puppy barking at you, the more you run, the more fiercely it barks. Some even bark excitedly and run to chase you. But if you don't run, but rush towards him, or bend down and pretend to pick up something, it will become cowardly, and some will even turn around and run away with their tails between their legs. Xiaohe is now facing this choice. Seeing that the guy who made his big brother suffer is rushing towards him, should he run, or run? Then run. The moment the yellow wheel rushed in front of Xiaohe, the guy jumped and dodged. At this moment, a clear laugh suddenly came from the sky. Stupid, look at Heidi. Then, a colorful light fell from the sky, and Heidi used her powerful claws to directly grab the yellow wheel, carried it to Kinzu and threw it down. Master, Heidi is back. Heidi wants to eat more. Seeing that the little guy wanted to stand on his shoulders, Kinzu quickly stopped him. Heidi, be obedient, go over there and wash your feet before coming back. Hearing this, Heidi tilted her head to look at the fountain over there, and jumped directly into it. Fuck, I told you to wash your feet, not take a bath. Kinzu covered his forehead with his hands. How come none of these idiots made him worry-free? He didn't care about killing the eel. He picked it up and threw it back into the bucket again. Kinzu took the wet Heidi into the villa. Hey, uncle, Heidi is back again. Shirley looked at the embarrassed Heidi and cheered immediately. She still liked this talking bird very much. The little parrot flapped its wings and splashed water on Kinzu and Shirley's faces. Hello Shirley, I'm the most beautiful Heidi. Looking at the smug look of this guy, Shirley added in her heart, except at this time. Clean, why is it back again? Eva looked at Kinzu in surprise. Could it be that her little man, the mysterious boss from the east, really knew magic? Kinzu raised his eyebrows proudly. I have said something that has never been broken. Eva laughed softly twice, and then asked curiously. Clean, will you give it back to her this time? Kinzu touched his chin, looked at the wet little parrot, and hesitated. Let's talk about it when the time comes, depending on her attitude. He was really hesitant now. It would be a pity to give such a well-trained parrot back to her. Besides, if she gets angry and takes the parrot back to New York, he would be at a loss. When Kinzu finished blowing Heidi's feathers and walked out of the villa with it, the expected fiery red sports car had not appeared yet. Hey, she doesn't plan to take it this time? Kinzu muttered in confusion. Heidi seemed to understand what Kinzu said, and said in a proud tone, Master, Heidi beat up Peter, and Haley won't know that I ran away for a while. Eh? Kinzu was a little embarrassed. Is this still the silly little parrot? It's simply against the will of heaven, isn't it? But thinking about the effect of the spiritual liquid, Kinzu was not surprised. It's good that he can have time to do his own things. If he is entangled with that woman all day, it will not be a good thing. Uncle, let's Heidi play with Shirley for a while, okay? The little girl put her hands behind her back, looking shy, and rubbed against Kinzu. Kinzu smiled, patted Heidi's little head, and reminded, Did you hear me? Go play with your little master Shirley, and don't make trouble. Chapter 491 Too many small fries. The little guy was very considerate this time. He flapped his wings and came to Shirley's shoulder, saying in a clear voice, Hello, little master Shirley, I am Heidi. Seeing the little girl holding Heidi to play, Kinzu brought the dejected Daha and Xiaohe to the open space next to the villa again, ready to start cleaning up today's lunch. What happened just now made Daha and Xiaohe lose face. When they saw the yellow wheel again, the two guys gnashed their teeth. If Kinzu hadn't been there, and they didn't know what it was, they would have pounced on it again. Kinzu didn't care about the two little guys' thoughts. After holding down the yellow wheel, he directly used a knife. He didn't expect that he could really catch yellow wheels here. This time he dragged two nets and caught a total of 3 yellow wheels, all of which were as thick as an adult's thumb and more than 60 centimeters long. They were definitely big guys. Kinzu might have a hard time dealing with other things, but dealing with eels was a piece of cake for him. If nothing else, when he was a kid, he caught at least 300 eels in the pond with a cage, if not 500, so Kinzu was very good at this thing, and he cut it all in one go with the scissors. After cleaning the eels, Kinzu looked at the several large crucian carps in the bucket, thought about it, and cleaned them up as well, preparing to make a crucian carp and tofu soup. Oh, there was no tofu. Turning his head to look at the little girl next to him who was chatting enthusiastically with the little parrot, Kinzu shouted, "Shirley, go tell your sister Eva to call old John and bring back some tofu from the Chinese supermarket." Shirley agreed obediently, and got up and went back to the villa. Kinzu smiled, turned around and continued his cleaning work. To be honest, Kinzu has become a little lazy now. He no longer has the mentality of working from 9 to 5, doing it by himself, and having enough food and clothing as in China. Now when there is something to do, he always asks others to do it, and tries to do as little as possible and enjoy more. When did this habit start? It seems to be after Halloween. Looking at the miserable state of those female soldiers, Kinzu felt a little blocked in his heart, and a little scared. Life is only a few decades long. If you have the conditions not to enjoy life, you're stupid. After a busy time, Kinzu cleaned the 3 yellow wheels and several 1-foot-long crucian carps. Kinzu was a little embarrassed about the remaining half bucket of small fish. Should he give it all to the small hawksbill turtle? Would it be too much? But if you eat it, you can't eat much from these small fish. How to cook them when they're so small? Steam or braise? Suddenly, Kinzu had a flash of inspiration in his mind, and he thought of a way of eating when he was a child. Fried small fish. That's right, just put the small fish in the oil pan and fry them. When they are all fried golden, you can take them out. At the time, whether you put them in the soup or eat them directly, they are delicious. Especially when you eat them yourself, they are crispy with a hint of fish fragrance. The fish bones are all fried crispy and can be chewed together. Thinking about it, Kinzu's saliva almost flowed out. No matter what, just eat it like this. Isn't it a little troublesome to clean it? I accept it. After making up his mind, Kinzu started to work and picked up a small fish and started to clean it. Speaking of cleaning these small fish are the most difficult to start with. Not only are they difficult to hold, but they are also not easy to cut. If you are not careful, you may hurt yourself, so many people often don't like to work hard on these things. But think about the delicious food that comes out of the frying. The nature of being a foodie in the bones, at this time, is fully reflected in Kinzu. When Eva came out, she saw this scene. Her little man, a billionaire rancher, was squatting on the ground, cleaning these small fish with his buds sticking out. Oh my God, clean, what are you doing? Can these be eaten? Eva covered her mouth in surprise, looking at Kinzu in comprehension. Didn't we say that we would feed the hawksbill turtles? Kinzu didn't even turn his head, still cleaning the small fish seriously, and smiled. Of course they can be eaten, and they are very fragrant. I often ate them when I was a child. But didn't you say that these were for feeding the turtles? Eva reminded from the side. Kinzu came back to his senses, looked at the small fish piled up like a small volcano in front of him, and then looked at the few small fish in the bucket, and was speechless for a moment. Damn, I was too involved and actually ate half of the bucket of fish. Kinzu smiled awkwardly and muttered, well, it's okay. The fish tank hasn't been bought yet. We can go catch fish in the afternoon. As soon as he finished speaking, he heard the roar of a car engine in the distance. Soon, a Ford pickup truck and a delivery truck arrived at the door of the villa. Little John opened the door of the pickup truck and took it down. He looked at it with some surprise. Kinzu, who was holding a knife with some fish scales on it, said, "Boss, the fish tank has been bought. Where can you put it?" Kinzu looked at this guy with a frown on his face and complained in his heart that you came at the right time. Especially the teasing look of Eva next to him made Kinzu want to slap her plump buttocks hard. Ahem, well, you guys carry the things in first, I'll wash my hands and come over. When Little John and the workers carried the fish tank into the villa, Kinzu finally realized his dream. While no one was paying attention, he used his freshly washed hands to slap a certain part of the body hard and kneaded it a few times. After causing the beauty to roll her eyes charmingly, Kinzu walked into the villa humming a little song with pride. After wandering around the villa for a while, Kinzu asked everyone to lift the fish tank to a corner next to the French window. After sending the workers away, Little John returned to the car and took down several boxes of rennet tofu and several pieces of old tofu. Facing Kinzu's somewhat surprised eyes, Little John's face flushed a little, and he explained hesitantly, "Well, boss, I didn't know which one you wanted, so I bought some of them." Kinzu smiled with satisfaction, took the tofu, patted Little John on the shoulder, and praised, "Good job, man." Little John almost floated out of the villa. Kinzu's fierce praise just now made him feel a little ecstatic. He was still a young man, and for him, getting praise from the boss was simply the most wonderful thing. Just like many bosses of companies, when they talk to their employees, they are full of praise and compliments. Sometimes, you may even have the illusion that the company cannot function without you. But what is the truth? Is it really like this? The company really cannot function without you? Or are you really that important in the boss's mind? Chapter 492 Wheel and Conquer Eel. In fact, it is not the case. These are just a means of management. If you can get someone to work steadily with some nice words, why not? And this trick is particularly effective, especially for some young people who have just entered the society. It is more effective than giving him a salary increase. Take Kinzu for example. When he first joined the company, the big boss also summoned him and praised him fiercely, which made Kinzu dizzy. Is his role really that big? In those days, his work enthusiasm was so high that he felt that he was favored by the boss and that it was not far from the time for him to counterattack the poor man and become a rich and beautiful woman. Until one day, he accidentally heard his colleagues talking about it, and then he knew that the boss had said this to every employee. Shaking his head, Kinzu smiled bigly. When did he become like this? Walking out of the villa, Eva had already cleaned the small fish and eels. Seeing Kinzu coming out, Eva asked with some confusion, "Clean, is this an eel? Why doesn't it look like it?" Kinzu was stunned. "Eel? What the hell is that? It's a yellow wheel, don't you know?" Eva blinked in confusion and looked at Kinzu in confusion. "What's the difference?" After a long pause, Kinzu finally realized that although eels and yellow wheels are different species, they are both called eels, and few people know the difference between the two. Eels, Monopterus albus, belong to the order Synbranchidae and are freshwater fish. They are foreign species in the United States and are generally imported from Southeast Asia frozen. But in recent years, after being illegally imported, they were released into the wild to reproduce in American rivers, so it is possible to buy fresh or rapidly frozen eels in Chinese supermarkets. Eels are very common on the east coast of the United States. The northeast corner of the United States is the main production area of eel fry in the world, with a larger output than China, and very few on the west coast. In the United States, except for a few Chinese supermarkets where you may buy eels, more than 99% of what you buy are sea eels. In addition to the completely different taste, the eel and the yellow wheel have yellow-brown spots on both sides of the eel's body, while the eel's back is dark brown, with a lighter belly and no spots. For example, if you are in a supermarket, unless you ask the seafood shop assistant directly, most employees will never know the difference between the two. Eva is like this now. She still wondered where Kinzu caught the eel. Kinzu spent a lot of time to explain to Eva the difference between the sea eel and the yellow eel. Well, they look the same, right? Eva shrugged, indicating that she understood. Looking at Kinzu curiously, she asked, "Then how are you going to cook it?" Kinzu smiled. Eating yellow wheel, of course, is to stir-fry it to enjoy it. Stir-frying it with some peppers, the taste is so delicious. You go back first, I'll go to the vegetable garden to take a look. Wiping the saliva that was about to flow out, Kinzu said hello to Eva and ran to the vegetable garden. He was going to get some green and red peppers. Arriving at the vegetable field, Kinzu was a little confused when he saw the scene in front of him. Is this still his vegetable field? Is this messy vegetable field in front of him, which looks like a dog's bite, really the lush vegetable field in the past? After a round, Kinzu found a big alligator turtle that was still eating in a corner, and slapped it. Unexpectedly, this guy was faster than Kinzu. Before the slap landed on his head, he was dodged by shrinking his neck. Kinzu was so angry that he wanted to hit him twice, but after looking at the hard turtle shell, he gave up helplessly. Kicking the turtle shell of this guy with his foot, Kinzu gritted his teeth and cursed. "You bastard, can't you just keep eating? So quickly, you have ruined my vegetable field like this." It's no wonder that Kinzu was angry. It can be said that half of the vegetable field in front of him has disappeared. Whether it is green vegetables or radishes, this guy will not let go of any of them. He simply pushed them all over, leaving no grass behind. The alligator snapping turtle tucked its head in, tucked its tail between its legs, and fled the scene at a rapid speed. Kinzu was stunned by its speed. Is this still a turtle? How come it looks so much like Daha with its tail between its legs? Shaking his head, Kinzu took a closer look. Fortunately, my peps were not damaged, otherwise he would have to skin this guy. After picking some peps that looked good, Kinzu passed by the fountain on his way back. He happened to see the alligator snapping turtle, Daha, and Xiaohe together. The three guys were huddled together, looking very close. Kinzu couldn't help but have 3 black lines on his head. Damn, he knew these 3 guys were getting together. After returning to the villa, Kinzu didn't waste any time and went straight into the kitchen. It was already 11 o'clock. If he didn't hurry up, he would be hungry. Take the boneless eel, cut it into 6 centimeters long segments, add spices, peppercorns, salt, pepper, cooking wine, and marinate for about 10 minutes in advance. Heat the pan, pour in olive oil, and when it is 80% hot, add peppercorns and green and red peppers and stir fry. After the spicy taste comes out, add the marinated eel and stir fry for a while. Wow, it smells so good, Uncle, what are you doing? Smelling the fragrance floating in the air, Shirley, who had just returned to the villa, found the kitchen, touched her belly with her hand, and looked at Kinzu pitifully. "Little girl, are you hungry now?" Kinzu covered the pot and turned back to look at Shirley with a smile. Yes, Shirley is hungry. The little girl nodded her head vigorously, as if she was afraid that Kinzu couldn't see it. Kinzu was about to say something when Heidi flew in with her little wings flapping. "Hungry, hungry, Heidi is hungry too." Fuck, Kinzu was shocked and grabbed the little guy. The kitchen is so small, how can I let you run wild? Shirley, be good, take this troublemaker out, the meal will be ready soon. If you are hungry, go eat some fruit first. Kinzu handed Heidi to Shirley and asked her to take this guy out to cause trouble. Then he shouted to the living room, "Jerry, come here." Before he finished speaking, little Jerry jumped in front of Kinzu and kept shouting to stop him. Okay. Kinzu waved his hand to interrupt the little guy's endless annoyance and ordered, "Go find some fruit, don't tell me you don't know where it is." Upon hearing this, Jerry was startled at first, then turned around and jumped out happily. "You guys go play in the living room too. If you're hungry, eat some fruit." Looking at Shirley beside him, Kinzu also sent the girl out, as she was wasting his time cooking. After the troublemakers left, Kinzu opened the pot lid, stir-fried it, and then picked up the seasoning and put it in. Because Kinzu had already added salt when he first pickled the eel, he just added a little more salt now, and then added some other seasonings, and it was served directly. Thanks to Fengxiai and Yujilio for their support. Chapter 493. Fried fish. And sitting in a row after Kinzu finished cooking the delicious fried eel, he went to the side to look at the small fish being marinated. Well, it's almost done. Mix it with some flour and fry it. He took the cornstarch from the side and added some in. Then Kinzu poured some wheat flour in, beat 2 eggs, and started to stir. Clean, what are you doing? After sending the little guys away, Eva ran in to learn from him, saying that she was helping Kinzu. This is to combine the batter with the small fish, and then fry it in the oil pan. Kinzu explained with a smile. Eva was watching with great interest. When she didn't understand something, she asked Kinzu. In order to train a new generation of chefs, Kinzu would answer every question. In this way, Kinzu mixed all the small fish, and the oil pan was already boiling, ready to start. Come on, Eva, go back, be careful with the oil, Kinzu said, picking up the small fish covered with batter with chopsticks and putting it into the oil pan. With the sizzling sound of boiling oil, the small fish in the pan quickly turned golden. Eva stepped aside and watched Kinzu's actions with interest, her eyes full of brilliance. It is said that women who are serious are very charming, and the same is true for men. If Eva followed Kinzu at the beginning because of gratitude and repaying a favor, now she feels that she really likes this man from the bottom of her heart. The atmosphere in the kitchen is very warm, and the atmosphere in the living room is also quite good. Although little Jerry was a little reluctant, he still took out a large plate of fruit and put it on the coffee table. Shirley first took an apple, looked at the little parrot next to her, and then brought a bunch of blueberries over. After eating a bite of the apple, she picked a blueberry and fed it to Heidi next to her. The two little friends got along happily. Daha and Xiaohe, who had just come back from outside and had an in-depth exchange with the alligator snapper, also came over to join in the fun. Since eating vegetables and fruits, the two guys no longer dislike the taste. Although they can't say they like it very much, they feel a little greedy when they see others eating. Little Jerry was not stingy. Since he took it out to share, everyone should have a share. He not only picked up a few big apples for the two guys, but also gave a big apple to Dudu, who was quietly being a beautiful girl. Looking at the big red apple in front of him, Dudu was a little dumbfounded, and his two small ears, which were already drooping, became even more droopy. He tilted his head and tried to take 2 bites, but although the apple was big, it was not fixed, so it would still run away. After trying several times and leaving a series of peels on the floor, Dudu's temper also came up. He couldn't hold this guy down, so he used a stupid method. So Dudu directly pushed the apple and forced it to the corner of the wall, and then he started to eat it with satisfaction. Plop. Shirley lost control of the blueberry in her hand and dropped it directly onto the coffee table, leaving Heidi with nothing to eat. Looking at the little Dudu in the corner, Shirley felt as if her heart had melted, as if she had seen herself back then, so helpless. So the little fellow abandoned her good friend Heidi, ran to the corner with red eyes, picked up Dudu, and returned to the sofa. Dudu was a little confused. What was he doing? Didn't he see that I was enjoying a big meal? While he was wondering, he saw a big apple cut into several pieces placed on the coffee table. Shirley also placed Dudu on the coffee table, pushed a small half of the apple in front of Dudu, and signaled him to eat it quickly. Dudu tilted his head and looked at Shirley. Knowing that this was his little master, he was not polite and lowered his head to hold the apple and began to eat it. Heidi seemed to understand something at this time, jumped over, and gently rubbed Dudu with her head under Dudu's somewhat nervous gaze. "Hello, I'm the most beautiful Heidi. Can we be friends?" Little Dudu was confused. Was this said to him? Then, little Jerry and Tom, Daha and Xiaohe, all came over to rub against little Dudu. They were a little overwhelmed by this little guy who had always been very insignificant. After a short period of adaptation, little Dudu, led by Shirley, integrated into this small circle. Everyone gathered around the coffee table and began to share their own delicious meal. When Kinzu and Eva came out with a small pot of fried fish, they saw a harmonious and happy scene. Looking at Eva in astonishment, Kinzu asked in confusion, "Why do I feel that the little guys are a little abnormal today? Even nodded in agreement, it seems a little too quiet." After looking at each other blankly, the two shrugged at the same time. "Who cares, as long as there is no trouble? Little girl, the delicious food is here, do you want to try it?" After putting all the dishes on the table, Kinzu called out to Shirley in the living room. Then, Shirley was holding Dudu, Heidi was standing on her shoulder, little Jerry was holding his wife, Daha was with little Hectares, and several guys rushed into the dining room together. Hey, you guys are not eating, why are you here?" Kinzu was a little confused, holding little Jerry's little ear. Little Jerry squeaked twice, but did not answer, but wagged his tail aside, as if waiting for something. After Shirley put little Dudu down, she turned around and went back to the living room, and took the little bowls of the guys. Then she put one in front of each guy, and even Heidi had a little bowl of her own. After Shirley divided the plates, she looked up and looked at Kinzu expectantly. "Uncle, can you give them some food?" "Oh, okay." Kinzu nodded blankly, stood up and began to divide the spoils among the little guys. Oh, no, it was to distribute food. Little Dudu got chopped carrots and some greens, which made the other kid swallow hard. Little Jerry and his wife got some dried fruits and a big apple each. Kinzu hesitated for a while before giving Da Hectares and Xiao Hectares 3 pieces of fried fish each, and cut a piece of the fried steak and gave it to the 2 kids. Finally, it was Heidi's turn. Kinzu was scratching his head. What did parrots eat? Nuts, nuts, Heidi also wants nuts. Seeing that Kinzu didn't give her food for a long time, the little kid was so anxious that he almost jumped over. Okay, don't get excited, you are all little ancestors, okay? Kinzu smiled bitterly and took out some more nuts and put them on the plate in front of Heidi. Finally, after thinking about it, he put a bunch of blueberries in it. He knew that parrots can also eat berries. Chapter 494 Heidi's Fate. After the distribution, Kinzu watched these guys start eating, feeling depressed. What on earth is going on? Are all the little guys having a headache today? Uncle, let's eat quickly, Shirley is hungry. Shirley looked at the little guys and felt relieved, so she rubbed her stomach and started to complain about hunger again. Kinzu scratched the little girl's nose helplessly, and she was the only one who was making trouble. After eating the delicious fried fish, Kinzu finally met the expected woman. Miss Haley, we meet again. Kinzu smiled at the rich girl in front of him, who had a perfect model figure, and felt so proud. Is this a counterattack for the rich and beautiful? Haley looked at the man opposite with a hateful smile on his face, and she hated him with gritted teeth. If possible, she really wanted to punch him. But for the sake of her little baby, she had to suppress this impulse and squeeze out an ugly smile. Mr. Clean, look. She couldn't continue talking at the beginning. If she hadn't been reluctant to leave this little parrot that had been with her for a long time, she would never have come this time. It was really too embarrassing. Kinzu restrained his smile and said seriously, Miss Haley, you can see it too. It's not that I took away someone's love. It's just that it doesn't want to leave. But it has been with me for a long time. I can't bear to leave her. Haley looked at Hader with a sad face, feeling indescribably sad. Kinzu saw this and felt that he seemed to have gone too far. There were so many parrots. Why did he have to take someone's love? But turning his head to look at Hader, Kinzu scratched his head again. Now it was really not his decision. This little guy really didn't want to go with her. Hader was also a little depressed when she heard the words of her former owner, but the pursuit of power and the pursuit of higher level evolution are the instincts of these animals, which cannot be controlled by their will. Just like an eagle will be thrown out of the nest by its mother as soon as it is born, don't they feel distressed? They also felt distressed. But for the better growth of the next generation and to adapt to this society more diligently, they had no choice. At Kinzu's signal, Heidi flapped her wings, and in Haley's unbelievable eyes, she flew to her shoulder and gently rubbed her face with her head. Baby, are you finally willing to go home with your mother? Haley hugged the little guy excitedly, crying a little. God knows, what was her feeling when she saw that Heidi was gone again? Kinzu sighed, thought about it, and asked, do you know why Heidi keeps running to me? Haley raised her head and shook it blankly after hearing this. This was also the most strange thing for her. Kinzu pointed at Heidi, didn't you find that it is much smarter now than before? Haley was stunned. She had never paid much attention to this problem. Now after Kinzu's reminder, she found that it seemed to be true. This is why. Haley looked at Kinzu with a choked voice, but she still stopped crying. Kinzu shook his head, with a mysterious expression on his face, and said, I can only tell you that staying here is the best choice for Heidi. Animals have the instinct of natural selection, so it will always stay here with me. Haley was dumbfounded. Looking at Kinzu's mysterious dark flag, she wanted to refute a few words. But she opened her mouth and couldn't say anything. Could it be? Is the East really as mysterious as her father said? Kinzu saw that Haley had a complicated expression, but seemed to believe what he said, so he continued to bewitch. Miss Haley, I think you like Heidi so much, you should also hope that she can live a better life, right? Haley nodded blankly and subconsciously said, Of course, I hope she can live a better life. As soon as the voice fell, she reacted. If she said that, wouldn't it mean that she agreed to keep Heidi here? Sure enough, Kinzu showed a triumphant smile, and looked straight at Haley. So, Haley, you agree to leave Heidi with me? Haley did not speak, turned her head, and just stared at the little parrot. After a long time, Haley wiped the tears from the corners of her eyes, raised her head and looked at Kinzu. Her voice became a little tired. Mr. Clean, can I come to see her often in the future? Kinzu nodded happily, of course no problem, after all, you are also her owner, it's just that my place is more conducive to Heidi's growth. Haley felt much more comfortable after hearing this, and looked at Heidi on her shoulder reluctantly, then stood up and said goodbye. She was afraid that if she stayed any longer, she would not be able to resist and ask someone to take Heidi back. When the fiery red sports car at the door roared and disappeared from sight, Eva turned around and said with a smile, What? Finally got what you wanted? Kinzu nodded with a smile on his face. Yes, she has decided to leave the little guy here. Eva shook her head helplessly, somewhat puzzled by Kinzu's behavior. Parrots are not rare animals in the United States. Is it necessary to offend such a rich second generation for a parrot? At first, she thought that Kinzu just wanted to get close to this rich second generation girl named Haley in the name of a parrot. After all, Haley, who has a hot model figure, is really not something that ordinary men can resist. But what she didn't expect was that Kinzu actually offended Haley for such a little guy in the end. Little girl, Haley will be handed over to you to take care of in a while. You have to take good care of her. Kinzu touched Shirley's little head and whispered. Since Haley has decided to join this big family, she must find someone to take care of her. Kinzu has no time to take care of her. Well, uncle, don't worry, I will take good care of Heidi. Shirley nodded her little head vigorously, snuggled in Kinzu's arms, watching the screen on TV without blinking. Kinzu smiled, didn't say anything else, but lay on the sofa and watched TV with the little one. At around 9 o'clock in the evening, when Kinzu was video chatting with Zumengyo, Chenmu's phone called again. Kinzu glanced at the video and saw Zumengyo, who was still lying in bed in a pink low-cut pajamas and refused to get up, and smiled gently. After using his eyes to eat tofu again, Kinzu raised the phone in his hand, and motioned Shirley next to him to come over and talk to her, and he walked aside to answer the phone. What's wrong? Calling so late? Kinzu asked in some confusion. Boss, it's sold. Our first bluefin tuna was sold just now. Chapter 495. Sold. Kinzu was stunned and asked hurriedly, who bought it? How much did it cost? Chenmu didn't keep it a secret. After laughing a few times on the phone, he said, Boss, it was bought by a sushi restaurant in an island country. It's called Waimei or something. I can't remember it clearly. Anyway, the final transaction price was $6.85 million. How much? Kinzu opened his mouth in astonishment. Chenmu swallowed his saliva on the other end of the phone, and then reported excitedly, Boss, $6.85 million. This bluefin tuna was auctioned for a high price of $6.85 million. Kinzu was also a little uneasy. It's just a fish. Is it necessary to be so crazy? 6.85 million? This is the United States. Obviously, this number cannot be RMB. $685, if converted into RMB, it would be 50 million, right? Spend 50 million RMB to sell a fish back. Who has such a big heart? I guess only those people in the island country would let the price become like this. Kinzu was still a little absent-minded after the call was hung up for a long time. Zumengyo pouted her lips on the video and said coquettishly, Kinzu, which beauty are you thinking about now? Are you thinking about that hot cowgirl in your house? Kinzu was stunned and came back to his senses immediately. He felt a little uneasy. How did this girl know? It was not until he saw the slight smile at the corner of her mouth that Kinzu realized that this girl was cheating him. What are you talking about? Kinzu showed a bitter smile at the corner of his mouth and told her what happened on the phone just now. What? You sold a fish for 50 million? Zumengyo looked at Kinzu with an expression that looked like a fool. Can you find a better excuse to change the subject? Kinzu slapped his head and knew this would happen, so he explained. This is true. I guess you will receive this news soon. This bluefin tuna was bought by a sushi restaurant in an island country. Hearing the word island country, Zumengyo frowned subconsciously, but she still looked at Kinzu with some doubt. Is there really such a stupid person who would spend 50 million RMB to buy a fish? Kinzu shrugged and said with a smile. What's so strange about this? Didn't my small fish sell for more than $1 million? If converted into RMB, it should be 7 or 8 million, right? Hearing this, Zumengyo nodded blankly. It seems to be true, right? After Zumengyo and Shirley waved goodbye and hung up that video chat, Kinzu breathed a sigh of relief. What a close call. I didn't expect that after not seeing her for a few days, this girl would actually learn to cheat. The next morning, Kinzu was still asleep when he was awakened by the ringing of his mobile phone. He picked it up in a daze and saw that it was a video call from Zumengyo. Kinzu became much more energetic at once. He suddenly stood up and turned his head to look at the side. Fortunately, he didn't sleep with Eva. After putting his mind at ease, Kinzu lay down again, yawned, and answered the video. What's wrong? Baby, do you miss me so early? Zumengyo wrinkled her nose slightly and looked at Kinzu suspiciously. What are you doing? Why did you take so long to answer the video? Kinzu rolled his eyes helplessly and couldn't help yawning again. He said depressedly, "I was still sleeping and was woken up by you. What happened?" Zumengyo stuck out her tongue, lay in the bedroom, looked at the handsome face that was sleepy on the computer, smiled secretly, and then said, "It's nothing, it's just that the news you mentioned has spread to the country, and many people are dumbfounded. They think those islanders are just hyping it up." At this point, Zumengyo complained a little unhappy. "Clean, why did you sell the fish to the island country? Now they're showing off again." After listening to this, Kinzu also recovered some spirit, lying on his back on the head of the bed again, smiling and said, "Baby, you don't know this, let them be proud for a day, and tomorrow they will vomit blood." After listening to Kinzu's meaningful words, Zumengyo immediately became interested and kept asking questions. It is said that women are very curious creatures. Kinzu has seen this now. In desperation, he explained all the arrangements for the later stage. Zumengyo was a little surprised and asked, "You mean, you still have 2 bluefin tuna of this size?" Kinzu raised his index finger and shook it gently. "No, I should say that I still have 2 bluefin tuna that are even bigger than this one." Zumengyo was stunned, really stunned. He made 50 million for one fish, what about 2 bigger ones? Will it exceed 100 million? In other words, Kinzu made 150 million yuan on this trip to the sea? "Hey, baby, what's wrong with you?" Kinzu was startled by Zumengyo's sudden silence, and hurriedly shouted twice on the other end of the video. "Ah? Well, I'm fine, I'm fine." Coming back to her senses, Zumengyo shook her head blankly. She really didn't know what to say. "Ha, what's wrong? Are you scared?" Seeing this, Kinzu squinted his eyes and looked at her with a smug expression. Zumengyo did not deny it. She nodded and sighed, "I'm a little scared." "You made 150 million just from this trip to the sea." Kinzu shook his head and explained, "This is just a coincidence. Even in the oceans of the world, there may not be such a big bluefin tuna. I just happened to catch it." Zumengyo blinked her bright big eyes and looked at Kinzu with a dazed look. "This also shows that you are lucky. So many people are catching bluefin tuna every year, but I have never seen them catch such a big one." Kinzu looked at Zumengyo's dazed expression and felt as if his heart was touched in an instant. He couldn't help but said, "Mengyo, then come and accompany me. I have to go out to sea in a few days. Can you come?" Zumengyo bit her lower lip, shook her head in embarrassment, and said timidly, "Husband, give me some more time. When I have dealt with the family affairs, I will go to the United States to accompany you, okay?" Kinzu nodded somewhat disappointedly. "Okay, then, take care of yourself at home, and call me if there is anything you can't solve." As soon as a few caring words came out, Zumengyo couldn't stand it anymore, and tears almost fell. When did this idiot become so considerate? After saying hello, he hung up that video in a hurry. Zumengyo lay alone on her big bed, crying and laughing, and no one knew what she was thinking. Kinzu looked at the black screen of the phone with some depression. It's rare for me to be so considerate. Is it easy for me? Or am I too scary? Did I scare her so much that she hung up that video? Si est escuchando esta novela en un canal distinto a mundo fanfic novelas, significat lo descarga and y subir en sinisfuerzos invitamos cordialmente a visitar nuestro canal. Mundo fanfic novelas all encontras la versión original de esta historia y podrás explorar muchas otras novelas de diversos narradores. Te esperamos para sumergirte en un mundo de novelas incredibles. Chapter 496 Lin was frightened. Sighing depressedly, Kinzu stretched and looked at the time. It was 9 o'clock. After getting up and washing up, Kinzu went downstairs. Before he sat down on the sofa, he heard the crisp sound from the bottom of the sea behind him. "Master, good morning, good morning." Kinzu turned around. He didn't know when 2 rods were hanging down from the corner of the living room, and a small wooden stick was tied to it. Heidi was squatting on it at the moment, combing her feathers energetically, and turning back to greet Kinzu from time to time. Shirley heard the voice, ran in from outside, and happily fell into Kinzu's arms, giggling and saying, "Uncle, good morning." "Good morning, little princess, what are you so happy about? Tell your uncle." Kinzu smiled and touched the little girl's pigtails. Shirley was still wearing a princess dress today, but it became a colorful striped style. I don't know if Christine likes to see the little girl wearing a princess dress, or if she likes to wear a princess dress. Anyway, the clothes she brought were basically princess dresses for summer, of all kinds, filling up his wardrobe. And today, Eva specially put on a few colorful hairpins for the little girl, which matched the princess dress. With her rosy little face, she looked particularly cute. Uncle Da Husky and Xiao Husky are so stupid, they can't even beat Dadu. Shirley pointed outside, and it was obvious that those guys were basking in the sun under the porch. Kinzu walked out holding the little girl's hand, and saw the two little guys rolling together at a glance. At first glance, Kinzu thought it was Da Husky and Xiao Husky, but after a closer look, it turned out to be Xiao Husky and Dadu. The two little guys hugged each other. Your feet kicked my face, and my feet kicked your chin. Neither of them gave in. However, Kinzu noticed that Xiao Husky looked very nervous, as if he was always on guard against something. Kinzu was a little speechless. Whose idea was this? Let the little husky and the rabbit compare the explosive power of their legs. Don't you know that when a rabbit is in a hurry, it dares to kick even an eagle? Wait, a rabbit kicks an eagle. Kinzu turned his eyes to Daha, and sure enough, he saw that this guy shrank aside, as if he would never go up. It makes sense. He was kicked not long ago, and now he is offering himself to be kicked. What if he can't stop? Wouldn't his handsome face be ruined? No, I won't go even if I kill myself. This is what Daha really thinks at the moment. What are they doing? Kinzu looked at the little girl curiously. Wrestling. Shirley said seriously. Wrestling? Yes, wrestling, I saw this on TV. Shirley blinked her big eyes twice, and looked at the excitement and looked very interesting. Kinzu covered his forehead. No wonder, you are not allowed to use your mouth in wrestling. I was wondering why Xiaohe didn't bite it. Walking forward, Kinzu picked up the little guys in one hand, and then waved at Daha. As soon as Daha saw Kinzu, he immediately became energetic and ran over happily. Kinzu looked at Shirley, who was a little confused, pulled her over and said, "Little girl, you have to remember that they are all one family with us, so you are not allowed to fight, do you hear me?" Shirley blinked her big eyes in confusion and said in confusion, "Why? I saw it on TV." Kinzu scratched his head, thought about it, and explained, "TV is TV, and they are all fighting for fun," and pointed at the little guys, "but if you let them fight, if they get angry, it will affect the harmony of our family." Shirley nodded as if she understood, and hesitated for a while before whispering, "Uncle, then don't fight with Sister Eva in the future. If you get angry, it will also affect the harmony of our family." Kinzu. Just after breakfast, Kinzu was still walking Xiaobai at the door when he saw old John driving a pickup truck and parked in front of the villa. When the pickup truck stopped, Biam, Real, Block, Fed, and Dot jumped out of the car with weapons in their hands. Kinzu rode over to Trot and looked at them in confusion. "What are you doing?" Old John closed the car door and said with a smile, "Boss, didn't you say there are large beasts here? We are going to sweep the woods here." Kinzu suddenly realized that this was the case. He nodded and said, "We need to sweep the woods. Otherwise, if wild boars or something run out and hurt people, it will be bad." Old John nodded in agreement. "Yes, so we are going to get rid of them today." After hesitating for a while, Old John asked, "Boss, can Will and the others come to help? The woods are a bit big, and I'm afraid we don't have enough manpower." Kinzu nodded slightly. "No problem, I'm not going out to sea today anyway." Taking out his mobile phone, Kinzu called Will and told him the situation. Will readily agreed. Soon, Will, Simon, Aiden, and Hubbard, all holding shotguns, came over from the dock. "Boss, isn't the noise a bit loud? Do you think they're scared?" Eva came over from the door of the villa and looked at the construction site that was almost completed with some worry. Kinzu turned his head and saw that it was just as Eva said. The workers who had just arrived at the ranch and were ready to start work were all looking at Kinzu and his group with horror. After all, more than a dozen big men, all holding weapons in their hands, did look a bit scary. Even Lin Yu, who was walking over here with her secretary, felt a little weak in the legs. If she hadn't seen Kinzu here, she would have turned around and ran away. Coming closer, Lin Yu looked at the dozens of eyes staring at her, and almost cried out of fright. She stammered, Kinzu, what are you doing?" Kinzu shook his head helplessly. These people were the kind who could associate. Who knows, they might have already associated dozens of ways for him to die in their minds. Reaching out and hitting the little head of Lin Yu, the bespectacled girl, hard, Kinzu laughed and scolded, "What do you think I want to do? Am I going to hurt you?" Hearing what Kinzu said, Old John and the others beside him all laughed kindly. Seeing this, Lin Yu gradually felt relieved. She rubbed her aching head and looked at Kinzu aggrievedly. "Why did you hit him so hard?" You're going to knock him silly. Seeing the bespectacled girl looking at him so aggrievedly, Kinzu immediately raised his hands in surrender, and explained the whole story with a wry smile. Now Lin Yu's heart was completely relieved. Her face turned slightly red, and she was speechless. She turned her head and fiercely glared at the even more unbearable little secretary. It was all this girl's fault. She had to encourage her to come and see the situation. She just said, how could Kinzu harm her? Thanks to Fengxi for the reward and support. Chapter 497 First Hunt. Okay, Kinzu waved his hand. You guys go back first, comfort the workers, and see how scared they are. Do we all look scary? Lin Yu curled her lips, turned around and left with her secretary, thinking that if you guys are not scary, then what kind of people are scary? Boss, then we'll go first. Old John smiled and carried his Remington on his back, waved at Kinzu, and was about to lead a few people to the woods. Wait, I'll go too. Kinzu hurriedly called Old John, turned around and ran to the villa, not even caring about his own Xiaobai. With a helpless neigh, Xiaobai knew that he had nothing to do, so he raised his neck and went to find his group of friends. After entering the villa, Kinzu rushed directly to the second floor, staring at Dale and Shirley in the living room. Boss, what are you doing? Dale pointed at the Remington Kinzu was carrying, a little puzzled. Kinzu slung the Remington over his shoulder and said with a smile, Old John is taking people to clean up the woods today. I'll go and take a look. Wait a minute, I'll go get my weapon. Dale stood up and walked upstairs. Kinzu wanted to say something, but he opened his mouth but didn't say it. He probably would be ignored by Dale if he said it. Looking at Shirley, who was sitting on the sofa, looking at him with her cute big eyes, Kinzu felt a headache. This girl is so smart and hard to deal with. Little girl, follow your sister Eva today, don't run around, okay? Shirley nodded, looking well behaved, which made Kinzu feel a little relieved. When Dale came down with the weapons, Kinzu took her out of the villa and met up with John and others at the entrance of the woods. This time, Kinzu didn't bring Daha and Xiaohe, because Old John and Ryan each had a blue-grey Australian Shepherd in their hands. Okay, let's go in. Seeing Kinzu nod, Old John took the Australian Shepherd in his hand and led the way. The rest of the people lined up in a row, with a distance of about 10 meters between each person, and began to wander along the woods on one side. Because there were 2 Australian Shepherds in front as a guard, Kinzu's group of more than 10 people walked quite easily. However, Old John and his friends still clearly found that this place was unusual. Because there were too many animals. Yes, there were a lot of small animals. Pheasants, hares, and even small foxes. Pay attention, there seems to be something strange here. Old John shouted a few times, raising everyone's vigilance. Before they went deeper than 100 meters, the 2 Australian Shepherds found their target, broke free from the leash in their owner's hand, and rushed out barking. Hey, Jamie, be careful. Old John followed quickly with some worry, and Ryan and Real followed closely with their weapons in their hands and pulled the safety. Kinzu was about to follow and Dale stopped him. Boss, we just need to be on guard, they can handle it. Kinzu thought about it and realized that if they couldn't handle it, it would be useless for him to go. So he tightened his grip on the Remington in his hand and began to imitate Dale and be on guard everywhere. In fact, although Kinzu was not very clear about the situation here, he had a general understanding of it. After all, Cheese had been lurking here at night these days, and it was not easy for Kinzu not to know. It was precisely because he knew that he was worried, because according to his understanding, there were not only wild boars in this small forest, but also clouded leopards, American lions, and even more dangerous jaguars. The reason why Kinzu had to follow was that he had the intention of conquering this big guy. After all, there are not many jaguars now. Although they are not as precious as South China tigers, they are still tigers after all. It would be so majestic to take them out. Just as Kinzu was daydreaming, the unique sound of Remington sounded in the distance. At the same time, a painful wail of a wild boar also reached the ears of Kinzu and his companions. It's a wild boar. Kinzu relaxed a little. As long as there were not too many wild boars, Old John and his companions would have no problem dealing with them. Just as Kinzu expected, a moment later, Ryan came over dragging a fat wild boar. Keep going. I can feel that there is something ahead. Old John frowned slightly. Decades of hunting experience told him that there must be a big guy ahead. What should we do at this guy? Kinzu pointed to the big wild boar lying on the ground, still panting slightly. Looking at the big wild boar on the ground, John was a little embarrassed, but thinking of the big guy in the deep woods, he said, Let her go for now, let's move forward first. Kinzu shook his head. No, the bloody smell is too strong, it will cause unnecessary trouble. Kinzu took out his mobile phone and called Lin Yu. He whispered a few words and hung up the phone. Wait 2 minutes, I'll have someone come over to carry this guy out. Old John nodded indifferently and began to check the bullets in the gun. After a while, a dozen men in blue work clothes, who were a little dirty, walked into the woods. Hey, this way, Kinzu waved at the confused people over there. Mr. Clean, it was Manager Lin who asked us to come over. Seeing so many foreigners with guns, the leading man, who was probably in his 40s, was a little nervous when he spoke. Kinzu smiled and pointed at the big wild boar on the ground and said, Did Manager Lin tell you? Carry this guy out, it's my gift to you, you can eat it whenever you want. At this time, several people turned their eyes to the big wild boar on the ground, and suddenly remembered the sumptuous wild boar feast a few days ago. They couldn't help but swallow their saliva. Mr. Clean, is this true? The leading man asked again with some uncertainty. When Lin Yu called them over, he just said to help the boss carry down the things, but he didn't say there were gifts. Don't worry, move this guy away quickly, we still have to go inside. Kinzu gestured to the big wild boar on the ground. Now, several people did not hesitate, and stepped forward together, and hurriedly lifted the big wild boar that looked to weigh at least 400 or 500 pounds. Mr. Clean, then we will leave first. Just let me know if you have anything. The leading man smiled innocently, greeted Kinzu, and then carried the big wild boar out. When the few people walked away, Kinzu waved his hand. Okay, let's move on. Old John nodded, and the few people maintained the previous formation and moved forward. Chapter 498 Jaguar. It seemed that because of the gunshots just now, Kinzu and his companions walked a long way this time and did not encounter any big guys. Seeing that they were about to reach the center of the forest, everyone's pace slowed down involuntarily and began to look around carefully. Woof woof woof, woof woof woof. The barking of the Australian sheep once again broke the silence in the forest. Kinzu and his companions followed the Australian sheep's line of sight, but only saw a low bush, and did not find any large animals. Just when Kinzu wanted to ask, he saw Old John and Ryan holding guns and approaching Kinzu, and shouted at the same time, Pay attention, it's a jaguar, don't shoot until the critical moment. Kinzu blinked in confusion. Why didn't he see it? Dale next to him seemed to notice Kinzu's confusion and gently pointed to a tree on the side. Kinzu looked in the direction Eva pointed and was immediately startled. Good fellow, on a big oak tree about 50 meters away, a creature with a pattern that looks like a leopard is lying on a branch, staring at the few people with bright eyes. Is this a jaguar? It really looks like a leopard. Kinzu muttered to himself. The jaguar is also called the jaguar. When an adult, it weighs 70 to 180 kilograms and has a bite force of up to 1,250 pounds. It is the third largest cat in the world today and a large cat living in America. The pattern on its body is more like a leopard, but the shape of its entire body is closer to that of a tiger. Among cats, the size of a jaguar is second only to that of a lion and a tiger. Although their patterns are more like leopards, their heads are larger in proportion, their faces are wider, and their chests are thicker. They have thick bodies, plump muscles, short limbs, and more beautiful patterns on their bodies. The black circular ring is larger, and there are usually one or more black spots in the ring. The tail is short, especially inside the eye socket, and the main feature is the tumor-like protrusion, which is not found in other panthera species such as leopards, tigers and leopards. Roar. A roar woke Kinzu from his thoughts. Looking at the jaguar standing on that branch and roaring angrily at him and his men, even Old John was scratching his head. Boss, this? Looking at Kinzu with some embarrassment, Old John wanted to say something, but in the end he didn't say it. Logically, it's just a jaguar, and he had killed many when he was young. At the time, as long as they appeared on the ranch, it would definitely be a matter of a bullet. But now it's not possible. This damn guy has become a protected animal, and now you can only look at it but not kill it. Kinzu waved his hand, and his thoughts turned rapidly in his mind. Should he take this guy? Or should he go back to China to get a South China tiger later? After thinking for a long time, Kinzu decided to take this one. After all, there are too many variables in the future, and only what you get is your own. After making up his mind, Kinzu opened the system, selected pet capture, and started throwing them out. As if it had sensed Kinzu's thoughts, the jaguar trembled all over, and then became even more angry, and jumped down from the tree with a roar. Everyone was shocked. If this guy dared to rush forward again, they would not care whether you were a protected animal or not. Killing a protected animal, at most you would have to pay money, and at most you would have to go to jail. But compared with the lives now, they still felt that life was more important. Just when the jaguar was about to pounce on Kinzu, Dale fired decisively. Bang! The sound of a gunshot not only scared the jaguar, but also shocked everyone. It was not until they saw that the jaguar was intact that everyone felt relieved. If there was a choice, no one would go hunting protected animals for no reason. The jaguar seemed to be really scared and began to retreat slowly. When it retreated to the bottom of the tree, it turned around and climbed up the tree. Just when everyone thought it was scared and was about to run away, a roar was heard again. The jaguar jumped down from the tree in the eyes of everyone's astonishment, carrying the momentum of 10,000 men, and rushed towards Kinzu. Bang! 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 Just when everyone was still in a daze, Dale decisively fired again. 3 consecutive gunshots rang out, and the jaguar that pounced on it fell to the ground, wailing in pain. At this time, Ryan's gun had just been raised, and old John's Remington had just been loaded with bullets. Fast, too fast. Everything happened in a flash, and even Kinzu, the person involved, didn't react. When he came to his senses, he was immediately shot and broke into a cold sweat. If Dale hadn't fired decisively just now, he should have been thrown to the ground by this guy now, right? Thinking of the consequences, Kinzu felt cold all over. He still had so many girls to take down, and he didn't want to be snapped so early. Thank you, Dale. Kinzu came back to his senses, wiped the cold sweat from his head, and thanked Dale. Dale waved his hand, put down the M16 inches his hand, and looked at the jaguar over there with some confusion. Why didn't this guy scream? Everyone came back to their senses at this moment, and looked at the jaguar with some fear. The look in their eyes when they looked at Dale was full of admiration. Such a fast reaction speed, such a decisive shooting, it is indeed worthy of being a retired Special Forces soldier. Kinzu was a little dazed at this time, because just now, the system actually prompted him that the capture was successful. In other words, the jaguar that was about to die has now become his. Fuck, this system is a pitfall, can't it capture it earlier? Kinzu yelled in his head in a bit of exasperation. Seeing that it was about to die, it actually told him. Dear host, the success rate of capturing injured animals will only increase by 50%. Kinzu was stunned. Well, this reason was given to him and he really had nothing to refute. Alright, I get it, you were a jerk. Kinzu turned off the system depressedly, and in the surprised eyes of everyone, he pushed through the crowd and walked towards the jaguar on the ground. Dale grabbed Kinzu from behind and carefully reminded him. Boss, it has not lost its ability to move yet, it is very dangerous now. Kinzu gently broke free from Dale's pull, looked at her with a smile, and teased. Don't worry, I'll be fine. Have you forgotten? I'm from China. Looking at Kinzu's confident smile, Dale inexplicably let go of her hand and thought of the group of little guys at home. Could it be that the boss is going to perform another miracle? Thank you, We are here for the reward of 500 starting coins, and thank you Fenxi for the reward and support. Thank you. Chapter 499. Subjugating the jaguar. As expected by Dale, Kinzu reached out to the jaguar struggling on the ground in front of everyone's astonished eyes. The jaguar's reaction made the foreigners even more dumbfounded. The jaguar, which was staring at them fiercely, became extremely docile the moment Kinzu approached. The big guy stretched out his tongue and licked Kinzu's big hand, whimpering in pain and grievance. Kinzu felt a little distressed when he saw this, and waved his hand, signaling everyone to stay away. Although the cowboys who were watching were very curious about what Kinzu wanted to do, they shrugged and turned away when they saw Kinzu driving them away. Before leaving, old John also loudly instructed, Boss, we're on the side, be sure to call us if you have anything. Don't worry, it's nothing, I just want to help this big guy heal his wounds. Kinzu shrugged, and was slightly moved. This old guy really makes people feel warm in their hearts. Old John didn't say anything, shrugged and left here. Although he had vaguely heard that his boss knew traditional Chinese medicine, he still didn't believe that Kinzu could cure the jaguar that was shot twice without any tools. Unless God came. Shaking his head and smiling bitterly, old John sighed. Was it because he was too old that he always thought of God? Kinzu waited until everyone left, then stretched out his hand and pretended to keep groping on the jaguar. In fact, he had secretly opened the system. After about 2 minutes, Kinzu felt that it was almost done, and he really felt sorry for the big guy, so he directly chose gene optimization. Fortunately, Kinzu stayed at the ranch honestly these days and accumulated enough spiritual energy. It was just right to perform gene optimization once. As the colorful light flashed, the jaguar stopped moving and froze in place. After a long time, when Kinzu was getting impatient, the jaguar in front of him moved. It turned over, 4 powerful legs supported on the ground, and raised its head to let out a thunderous tiger roar that spread throughout the forest. The faces of the people not far away all changed, and they rushed over here, especially Dale. At this moment, she felt a little regretful. Why didn't she insist on staying with him? Before they ran to Kinzu's side, the tiger roar came again, but this time, there was a hint of grievance in the voice. It turned out that Kinzu was a little dizzy because of the sudden roar of this guy. In anger, he kicked this guy's big butt directly. When Dale and old John arrived, they saw this scene. Their boss was chasing a big guy with a body length of 2.5 meters, punching and kicking. I told you to scream, I told you to scream, I see if you still scream. While beating, Kinzu kept muttering, which made Dale dizzy. Boss, is this the jaguar from before? Looking at the lively jaguar in disbelief, Dale unloaded her magazine again, unable to accept the scene in front of her. She was 100% sure that her 2 shots had definitely hit the target successfully. But, how to explain the scene in front of her? Dale rubbed her hair a little frantically. For the first time, this hot female Special Forces soldier doubted her eyes. Yes, this is the jaguar from before. What's wrong? Kinzu pretended to be indifferent and looked at Dale indifferently. What's wrong? Dale pointed at Kinzu in disbelief. You just pretend, you actually asked me what's wrong. Boss, this is simply a miracle. Tell me quickly, is it God who has come? Did he say when he would summon him, a faithful believer? Old John next to him had a dull face, and the words in his mouth made Kinzu confused. What is going on? Patting the old man on the shoulder, Kinzu smiled and comforted him. Don't worry, old John, God said that he doesn't have time to see now, wait a few decades. Turning his head to look at the people who were a little overwhelmed, Kinzu smiled and shrugged his shoulders, looking at everyone with a very annoying expression and said, well, there's no need to be so surprised, this is just a simple Chinese medical technique. Everyone looked at me, I looked at you. Do you believe it? Do you believe it? Anyway, I don't believe it. I don't believe it either. Being stared at by everyone like this, Kinzu couldn't accept it. He patted the big butt of the jaguar next to him. Ahem, well, let's continue and try to finish it as soon as possible. The jaguar that was suddenly attacked roared in grievance, and looking at Kinzu's naughty eyes, it seemed to understand something, and raised its voice as if it was a prank. Roar. 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 Including Dale, all the cowboys shuddered together and looked at the jaguar with horror. Dale subconsciously aimed the gun at the guy and almost fired it accidentally. This scared Jaguar, and he turned around and hid behind Kinzu. This woman is too dangerous. It was she who raised the stick and made him fall down. It's better to stay away from her. Kinzu was pushed by Jaguar's big butt and faced Dale's gun directly. He was so scared that he almost ran away. He raised his hands and shouted loudly, Hey, Dale, put down the gun quickly, be careful of accidental discharge. Dale came to his senses and quickly put the gun away, then raised the magazine in his right hand and smiled. Well, boss, this is an empty gun. Puff, ha ha ha. The cowboys next to him laughed. Dale helped them to get revenge for the sudden shock. Kinzu breathed a sigh of relief and looked at Dale with a bit of a smile. That's right, he clearly saw her unloading the magazine just now. What was he afraid of? Turning his head to look, Kinzu kicked the jaguar hiding behind him with its big butt sticking out. Okay, it's okay, why don't you get up? The jaguar raised its big head and secretly glanced at Dale. Seeing that she didn't have a stick in her hand, it began to wonder whether it should kill this guy now. Kinzu saw what this guy was thinking at a glance and kicked him again in anger. Remember this, you are not allowed to hurt any human without my permission. Do you hear me? The jaguar was hit twice in a row and immediately wilted. It lowered its eyebrows and whimpered to show that it understood. After hesitating for a while, the big guy took 4 steps and came to Dale. Seeing this, Dale froze all over and tried to restrain her instinct to take the gun. She decided to trust Kinzu once. Chapter 500 Tiger Cub. Fortunately, Kinzu did not disappoint her. The jaguar just sniffed her lightly and did not make any other moves. Just when Dale was gradually relaxing, the jaguar turned around and rubbed her lightly. Everyone swore that he really rubbed her lightly, really. But the result was that Dale staggered and she was so nervous that she almost shot directly. However, the jaguar only rubbed her and did not make any other moves. He turned around and walked towards the others. Dale breathed a sigh of relief, but also felt a little amused. It was estimated that this guy was taking the opportunity to take revenge. After leaving Dale, the jaguar came to Old John again and sniffed him. Like Dale, Old John also tensed up his muscles nervously, ready to run away at any time. Although he also missed God, no one was willing to go if he could avoid it. Soon, the jaguar walked around the crowd and returned to Kinzu. He lowered his head and rubbed Kinzu's thigh, looking like a spoiled child, which made Kinzu's scalp numb. Damn, you were a giant of the forest with a body length of 2.5 meters, can you not be so cute? Just as they were about to continue walking with the big guy, they saw the jaguar left the group and walked towards the bushes alone. The two Australian shepherds stared at it nervously. Although they had been close to it just now, they couldn't help but get nervous when such a dangerous guy approached. Ignoring the nervousness of the two Australian shepherds, the big guy wagged his tail and went into the bushes. Boss, what is it? Gone. Dale looked at Kinzu curiously, wanting to know what his reaction would be. Kinzu touched his nose and looked at the bushes awkwardly. Well, I guess it went home to discuss it. After all, it's going with me. As if to cooperate with Kinzu, just as he finished speaking, the jaguar took the two little guys and walked out of the bushes. Dale opened his mouth wide and looked at Kinzu with a strange look, as if he was looking at God. Kinzu was also a little stunned. No way, giving face like this. Old John beside him seemed to have figured something out. He nodded and said with a smile, so there are tiger cubs here. No wonder the jaguar won't let us get close. As he said that, Old John looked at the two little guys with some doubts, muttering, it's really strange. Why would the jaguar bring the little tiger cubs here? Kinzu laughed in his heart. Brother will tell you, this forest is now a spiritual place. When the jaguar came to Kinzu, he had the opportunity to look at the two little guys. If these two little things had not come with the jaguar, Kinzu would definitely have mistaken them for ocelots. Because they're so similar, with round little faces, round bodies, and some yellow and brown patterns, they look like ocelots no matter how you look at them. It should be because they're a little shy. The two little jaguars are a little nervous and their bodies have been tightly attached to the big jaguar who is not sure whether it is their mother or their father. The four little eyes kept turning around, trying to figure out what was in front of them. Seeing this, Kinzu bent down and wanted to pick one up to take a closer look. Unexpectedly, the two little guys were quite alert. Before Kinzu reached out his hand, they dodged it. Seeing this, the big jaguar roared in a low voice without waiting for Kinzu to speak. It was probably teaching its children a family education class. After its family education class was over, Kinzu reached out again. This time, the two little guys did not hide. Although they were still a little nervous, they let Kinzu pick them up. Holding them in his arms, Kinzu looked left and right, and was a little confused for a while. Because the two little jaguars looked too similar, even their hair was the same color, he really couldn't tell which one was which. Old John, who was standing by, saw that the matter was settled, and carefully suggested, "Boss, let's continue to move forward." Kinzu came back to his senses. Now the main purpose was not to play, but to do business. But looking at the little guys in his arms, Kinzu scratched his head. Let them go and let them follow by themselves. As soon as this idea came up, it was rejected by Kinzu himself. This wouldn't work. Turning his head to look at Dale, Kinzu's eyes rolled and waved. "Boss, what's wrong?" Dale came over with some confusion. "Here, help me hold one first, one for each of us." Kinzu put a little guy into Dale's arms without hesitation. Dale didn't react for a while, and after taking the little jaguar, she was a little at a loss. Old John and Will followed behind, looking at each other. Is this okay? It turned out that Kinzu drove the big jaguar to the front to lead the way. As a result, wherever they passed, not to mention the big guys, even the little guys were fleeing in embarrassment. Jaguars are not like humans, who know to leave some fire for you to survive. As long as they see something edible and they can beat it, jaguars usually just kill it all, and no one can escape. After walking for most of the day and visiting most of the woods, they found nothing. The cowboys and fishermen following behind were so bored that they were about to fall asleep. Didn't they say they were here for a sweep? Why were they just walking? After going around in a circle again, Old John couldn't stand it anymore and suggested, "Boss, you can't do this. With the jaguar around, many large wild animals will just avoid it." Kinzu thought so too and stopped awkwardly. Looking at the people behind him, he asked helplessly, "Then what should we do? Drive this guy back?" Old John shook his head. "That's not the case, but we have to act separately. We can't work together in a group like this, otherwise the area we can observe will be too small." Kinsey nodded and agreed with Old John's suggestion. So the cowboys and fishermen quickly divided into groups of 2, and after saying hello to Kinsey, they dispersed in all directions. Thanks to Fengxiai and Panyu for the rewards, and to Xiaobao and Xuan for the 2,000 starting coins. Thank you. Fin est captulo muchas gracias por la hasta el final. No se olviden de dar like buscar mis contenido exclusivo y exeo inmediato. Suscríbete a nuestro Patreon. Recuerda, cada like, suscripción nos anima a continuar. Gracias a todos nos vemos en el próximo video.